If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 1. My name is Tom Riddle. July 30th, 1991. For gloomy, rain-prone London, it was an unusually sunny day. It was the kind of day that made you want to drag a lawn chair into the yard and take a peaceful nap under the sky. Of course, only a lucky few could afford such a leisurely life. Most people were too busy hustling, doing their best to cling to dignity and survive a little longer in this chaotic world. That was especially true for neighbourhoods like Lewisham, in South London. Central areas like Chelsea and Kensington had long since been taken over by aristocrats and blood-sucking finance brothers. Working-class families, dock workers, and many Caribbean immigrants were pushed out to districts like this one, quieter, rougher, and far from the heart of the city. People hurried down the streets, rushing to work like their lives depended on it because, for many, it did. No one wanted to be the reason their boss's mansion or sports car didn't get finished on schedule. But even in their rush, people couldn't help but slow down and do a double take when they passed a certain old man. Not that the old man minded. He just smiled and gave polite nods to passers-by, moving at a surprisingly brisk pace that put many younger folks to shame. He attracted attention for one simple reason: he looked absolutely out of place. Tall and lean, with silver hair and a beard long enough to tuck into his belt, he wore a floor-length purple robe embroidered with stars and crescent moons. After about half an hour of walking, the old man stopped in front of 23 Elm Avenue, a modest white townhouse with a sign on the door that read, Lewisham Children's Home. The neighborhood was clean and quaint. Rows of white, terraced houses lined the streets. It was office hours, so hardly anyone was around. He rang the doorbell. "Coming!" A woman's voice called out, and a few seconds later, the door creaked open. A middle-aged woman in her 40s blinked at the sight of the man on her doorstep, stunned into silence for a solid 5 seconds before finally asking, uncertainly, "You're Headmaster Dumbledore?" The old man nodded with a warm smile. "That's right. Albus Dumbledore, headmaster of Hogwarts. You must be Ms. Ullman. I received your letter, and I thought I'd come in person to clear up any doubts you may have." Ms. Ullman forced a smile, though her mind was racing. He's a headmaster? Dressed like that? Is his brain this old? Should I call someone? But Dumbledore didn't explain further. Instead, he peeked past her into the house. "And where might the boy be?" "Out back. He's training in the yard. Come with me." She stepped aside and led him through the house. By the 1990s, large institutional orphanages in the UK had mostly been phased out. In their place, the government promoted foster care, encouraging families to take in children. Homes like this one were more of a temporary haven for kids going through family issues or emotional struggles. Most didn't stay longer than 6 months. But there were exceptions. Orphans who didn't want to be adopted could live here until they turned 18, receiving government support along the way. Ms. Ullman was the appointed caretaker of this home. Everyone else working there volunteered their time. They passed through the house and stepped into the backyard. 4 boys, all around 10 years old, were hanging out. One of them stood out immediately, a striking boy with black hair and sharp eyes, sweat on his brow, pounding away at a worn-out punching bag hung from a drying rack. His fists were covered in battered boxing gloves, and every punch made the bag tremble. He was frankly stunning. Sharp features, a straight nose, and eyes that practically glowed with intensity. Like someone had chiseled him out of marble with divine precision. "Tom!" Ms. Ullman called out. The boy paused, turned, and she continued. "This is Headmaster Dumbledore. He's come to invite you to his school." "Thank you, Aunt Ullman." Tom nodded politely, then turned to the old man and gave a slight bow. "Nice to meet you, Headmaster Dumbledore." "Relax, my boy," Dumbledore chuckled. "If you don't mind, could we speak in your room?" "Sure," Tom answered without hesitation. He peeled off his gloves and handed them to another boy nearby. "Seth 1,000 punches. No slacking." "Why yes, boss." Seth groaned, but obediently slipped on the gloves and got to work. As Dumbledore stepped back inside, he glanced over. Sure enough, Seth was already punching with full force, sweat starting to fly. Upstairs, Tom led Dumbledore to his room. He had the master bedroom spacious, with its own private bathroom and walk-in closet. A desk sat in the corner beside a bookshelf stacked with trophies and certificates. More books cluttered the desk itself. "Please, take a seat, Mr. Dumbledore. There was only one chair in the room, which Tom offered. He sat on the bed himself. The chair's a bit small for me, Dumbledore said as he settled in awkwardly, legs a little cramped. But he didn't mind. His smile was gentle, his eyes twinkling with warmth. Let's do a proper introduction, he said softly. I'm Albus Dumbledore, headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. I'm here to officially invite you to join our school, where you'll learn to control and master the power of magic. I know, sir. I've read that letter at least 50 times. Tom cleared his throat. My name is Tom Riddle. As you can see, I'm an orphan. It's an honor to be accepted into Hogwarts, especially with the headmaster himself coming to see me. Tom Riddle. Dumbledore's sharp eyes suddenly lost focus, his expression distant. Tom Riddle. Orphan. Handsome. Commanding. Could the cliché checklist get any more complete? Chapter 2, A Gamble. To be fair, Dumbledore had seen a lot. After a lifetime filled with magical chaos and impossible situations, he was pretty hard to rattle. Sure, the coincidences were piling up fast, but he wasn't the type to jump to conclusions just because a kid had the same name and background as a certain infamous dark wizard. He only spaced out for a few seconds before regaining his usual composure. Stroking his beard to cover his momentary distraction, Dumbledore smiled warmly at the boy still holding that perfectly polite posture. Mr. Riddle, honored might be a stretch, but I agree, this is certainly an interesting twist of fate. He chuckled lightly before continuing, you see, we originally assigned a very busy potions professor to be your escort. But he's at a critical stage in one of his brews and couldn't leave his lab unattended. So, you're stuck with this old man instead. But don't worry, you'll meet him soon enough. He's a true master of his craft. You'll learn a lot from him. Dumbledore's tone shifted slightly, growing more curious. That said, Mr. Riddle, you're a rather unusual first year. My colleagues and I have guided plenty of Muggle-born students into the wizarding world, but I've never met one who accepted the existence of magic quite so quickly. He gave a casual snap of his fingers. The messy books on Tom's desk lifted into the air and neatly rearranged themselves. Normally, we have to use a few tricks like that to convince them we're not mad. Didn't you ever wonder if all this talk about magic was just some elaborate prank? Tom met Dumbledore's gaze head-on and calmly raised his hand. Magic's always been part of my life, sir. A thick, gold-edged envelope shot out from a hidden gap in the bookshelf. His Hogwarts acceptance letter landed neatly in Tom's hand. I received this yesterday, he said, turning it over in his fingers. But even before that, since I was 6, I've noticed things. Strange abilities. I figured I couldn't be the only one. There had to be others like me out there. Clap, clap, clap. Dumbledore didn't hold back his applause. His eyes twinkled with genuine admiration. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Your control is outstanding. But allow me to correct one thing: you are special. In fact, children who can perform controlled magic before getting a wand are incredibly rare. Even in our world. I promise you, Tom, you have a bright future ahead of you in the magical arts. It was true. Young witches and wizards often had accidental magical outbursts. It was expected. But most couldn't control it, and the magic usually lay dormant until they were trained with a wand. What Tom had just done was far beyond what most could achieve at his age. Dumbledore was genuinely excited. Hogwarts was about to gain an extraordinary student. And yet, in the back of his mind, he couldn't help but feel a tiny knot tighten. He really is just like him. You flatter me, sir, Tom said modestly, lowering his gaze with what looked like a shy smile, though inside, he was quietly relieved. One hurdle cleared. Yup, Tom was a transmigrator. When his powers first surged at age 6, the flood of magic also unlocked memories from a past life. At first, he hadn't realized exactly where or what this world was. Not until 3rd grade, when he entered a math competition and met a girl named Hermione Granger. After chatting with her and finding out her dad was a dentist, the realization hit him like a freight train. This is the wizarding world of Harry Potter. And his name in this life? Tom. Tom Riddle. As in that Tom Riddle. Voldemort. He'd seriously considered changing his name, but UK law required parental consent for minors or waiting until he turned 18. And besides, what if changing it somehow interfered with the Hogwarts letter tracking system? He wasn't about to risk missing his one shot at real magic. So, he kept the name. carried its weight. And just 2 days ago, the fabled Hogwarts letter arrived. What he hadn't expected was for Albus Dumbledore himself to come pick him up. But looking at it now, it made sense. Tom Riddle was just too significant a name for Dumbledore to ignore, especially when the boy behind it was handsome, smart, and clearly talented. It was only natural the headmaster would want to investigate himself. Make sure this wasn't some reincarnated Dark Lord situation. And when Dumbledore had started questioning how easily he accepted magic, Tom knew it was his first real test. He'd considered feigning surprise and wonder, but fooling a man like Dumbledore, a century-old veteran wizard with more life experience than most country's, wasn't realistic. So instead, Tom took the bold route. He showed off. Displayed his gift. Owned it. And used it as the reason for his calm reaction. Of course, it was still a gamble. He was betting on Dumbledore being fair-minded enough not to judge him just for having that name. And that he wouldn't resort to mind-reading or legilimency to dig through his memories. If he'd guessed wrong, well, he'd planned to confess everything. Full disclosure. Who knows? Maybe he'd even get to witness Dumbledore speedrunning the destruction of all 7 Horcruxes in one afternoon. Though there was always the risk of being dissected in the name of magical science afterward. Thankfully, it hadn't come to that. Dumbledore had passed the test too kind, wise, and entirely decent. I must say, Mr. Riddle, Dumbledore said as he stood up, this has gone far more smoothly than I expected. He smiled and added, since we've still got time, how about we head to Diagon Alley and get everything you need for school? I have an errand there myself. Of course, sir. Just give me a second. Tom walked over to his desk and pulled a thick wad of cash from the drawer, mostly 10 and 5 pound notes. In the UK, just 50-pound notes are rare, almost suspicious. Try using one at a corner shop and someone might not only refuse it, but also throw in a few creative insults involving your family tree. Mr. Riddle, Dumbledore said, blinking as he realized what he'd overlooked. I should have mentioned Hogwarts and the Ministry offer a full scholarship to students with financial difficulties. You wouldn't need to repay a thing. Tom raised the stack of notes with a smirk. But I'm not exactly in need, am I? He flipped through the notes. 1,200 pounds in total and smiled. Chapter 3, The Leaky Cauldron and Diagon Alley. Tom didn't have any cheat codes or magical advantages, but maybe because he'd lived 2 lives, his memory was far better than average. Not photographic, but closey, and he had a knack for learning fast. People often assume academic competitions are only a thing in Eastern countries, but British schools have their fair share too. Thanks to prize money from various contests, school grants, government aid, and even a few TV appearances, Tom had managed to build up a decent amount of savings. What he pulled out from the drawer earlier was just pocket money. He still had £40,000 quietly sitting in a bank account, earning interest. When Dumbledore found out how resourceful Tom was, he couldn't help but give him a thumbs up, genuinely impressed. After saying goodbye to Ms. Ullman, Tom left the orphanage with Dumbledore. Normally, someone like Ullman wouldn't let any of the kids leave so easily, but Tom's maturity and capability had earned him a lot of trust over the years. Though, maybe Dumbledore had secretly used a bit of magic to help ease the process? As they walked down a shaded path, Dumbledore didn't bother using any magical shortcuts. Instead, he seemed to enjoy the stroll, chatting with Tom like a kindly old uncle, asking about his life and experiences. Tom didn't hide anything. He told the truth. He'd been abandoned as a baby, left at an orphanage with nothing but a name and a surname. His parents had disappeared from his life entirely. The next time he heard anything about them, it was through a news report about a plane crash. No inheritance, just debts. Thankfully, he wasn't legally required to pay them off. After hearing all this, Dumbledore's smile faltered slightly. Stuff like this wasn't unheard of in the Muggle world. Some people, after unexpected pregnancies and with abortion laws being strict, would go ahead and have the child then abandon them to the state. And they'd just go on living their lives, carefree. Meanwhile, the government or people like Ullman were left to clean up the mess. Dumbledore sighed. The magical world in England was in dire need of fresh blood. Families like the Weasleys were the exception. 6 boys and 1 girl, any pure-blood family would kill for that kind of size. Plenty of wizards secretly wished they'd married Molly Weasley. If they had, their family tree might be thriving too. Same country, different fates. I noticed the kids at the orphanage seem a little scared of you. Dumbledore asked casually as they walked. Even when they left, that boy named Seth was still obediently punching a sandbag like Tom had told him to. That scene, it reminded Dumbledore of some rather unpleasant memories. "Sir," Tom stopped walking and looked up at him. Dumbledore's beard was too thick to see his face clearly, but Tom could meet his deep, wise eyes. "Do you know what an orphan fears the most?" Dumbledore gave him his full attention. "It's being seen as weak." Tom's voice was calm. "If people realize you're an easy target, they'll try to push you around just to feel powerful. So the best way to avoid being bullied, is to become someone others are too afraid to mess with." Dumbledore's eyes widened a little, and his beard twitched ever so slightly. "Of course, I'm not bullying Seth," Tom added quickly, a little awkward. "He's my friend. I'm just teaching him how to defend himself. He's starting secondary school soon, he'll need to be able to protect himself." "He'll appreciate that, someday," Dumbledore said warmly. He remembered Seth's determined little face as he trained and could tell the bond between the two boys was genuine. "I have a feeling you might end up in Hufflepuff," he said with a chuckle. "Assuming you don't, actually bully people." "Hufflepuff? What's that?" "It's one of the schoolhouses. All four are wonderful in their own way." As they talked, their shadows stretched out behind them, eventually vanishing into the elm-lined road. After taking a train and then switching to the underground, they finally arrived an hour and a half later at the entrance to Diagon Alley, the Leaky Cauldron. It looked as dingy and run-down as its name suggested. 3 in the afternoon wasn't exactly peak hours, so only a few patrons were scattered across the tables. The moment they saw Dumbledore, however, every wizard in the room stood up, nervously greeting him. Even the hunched bartender, who was wiping down the counter with a suspiciously dirty rag, hurried over with a big grin. "Good afternoon, Professor Dumbledore." "Good afternoon, Toma. I suppose we have 2 Toms here today," Dumbledore said with a chuckle. He turned to introduce them. "Mr. Riddle, this is Tom, the innkeeper. Funny coincidence, isn't it? Tom, this young man here is a first-year student. I am helping him pick up his school supplies. Fate, I tell you." "What a pleasure, young Tom," the bartender laughed. British Toms might not number in the tens of thousands, but still, meeting 2 in one afternoon was amusing enough. And since Dumbledore was clearly fond of the boy, the innkeeper turned the charm up a notch. "After you're done shopping, come back for a drink on the house. Butterbeer, of course. No alcohol." "Sounds like a plan," Dumbledore agreed. "We'll hurry, then. See you later, Tom." "See you soon, Professor." Dumbledore led young Tom through the pub and into a small, walled courtyard behind it. He pulled out a wand, knobby and gnarled, and explained how to open the entrance to Diagon Alley. 3 up, 2 across. With 3 quick taps of the wand, the bricks shifted and pulled apart, revealing a wide archway. The sounds of laughter, chatter, and bustling crowds spilled out instantly. Tom's eyes lit up at the sight of the lively street beyond. "The magical world." "That's right," Dumbledore said, watching his reaction with quiet satisfaction. For the first time, Tom looked like a real kid. "Come on, then first stop, money." They walked down the busy street toward Gringotts. Because of Dumbledore's popularity, almost every few steps someone greeted him, waving or stopping to chat. By the time they reached the grand entrance of the Wizarding Bank, 2 goblins were already waiting. One of them gave a deep bow and offered to escort them personally inside to the exchange desk. Tom's new life had just begun. Chapter 4, Borrowing Money from the Headmaster. Normally, you can only exchange up to 70 galleons, but since you're with Professor Dumbledore, I'll make an exception and give you a limit of 100. That's £505, with a £5 transaction fee. That's it. Tom frowned in annoyance. "But Professor Dumbledore just told me most people can exchange around 200 galleons." "That was a long time ago," the goblin replied flatly. Goblins rarely bothered being polite to people who couldn't make them moany, but Dumbledore's presence clearly bought Tom a little extra patience. "Muggle currency isn't worth much to us. We hardly use up the pounds we exchange every year. So Gringotts limits how much we take. Still, don't underestimate it, these should be enough to cover your first year at Hogwarts." 200 galleons? That was 50 years ago. You Muggles really think your money's worth that much now? "Sorry, Tom," Dumbledore said with an awkward smile. "Last time I brought a student to Gringotts was over 40 years ago. I suppose I'm a bit out of date." Tom couldn't help but roll his eyes. 40 years? Prices in the Muggle world had probably tripled since then. Honestly, considering inflation, the goblins were being surprisingly fair. Professor, can I borrow some money? Tom asked casually, striking while the iron was hot. I don't think this'll be enough to get all the books I want. I can pay you back in pounds, or if you're patient you could wait until I graduate and I'll repay you in galleons. With interest, of course. Tom was secretly hoping Dumbledore would pick the second option. After all, Dumbledore was supposed to kick the bucket in his 6th year. Free money, anyone? Muggle money doesn't mean much to me, Dumbledore said with a chuckle. All right, you can pay me back after you graduate. I'll look forward to it. Dumbledore had always been generous with his students, even financially. And since this shortfall was partly his fault, he agreed readily. Wait here a moment. I'll go fetch the money and take care of a few personal matters while I'm at it. With that, he followed a goblin toward the vaults. Tom's heart skipped a beat. Wait, personal matters? Wasn't it supposed to be Hagrid who picked up the Philosopher's Stone? Could Dumbledore be changing plans because of his presence? Well, whatever. Not his business. After giving it a moment's thought, Tom lost interest and started asking another goblin about the possibility of exchanging gold for galleons. The answer? Yes, it was possible, but the rates were robbery. At the current exchange rate, £5 could buy roughly 0.8 grams of gold. And it took 10 grams of gold to get 1 galleon. That meant 1 galleon cost about £60. Over 12 times the original amount. Despite the name, galleons weren't actually made of gold. They were goblin-made alloy coins. Who knows what was in them? After doing the math, Tom quickly gave up on the idea. His Muggle savings would be gone in no time. It made more sense to earn and spend money within the magical world. About half an hour later, Dumbledore returned to the Gringotts lobby holding a small pouch and a key. He handed both to Tom. There's 100 galleons in here, he said. I also rented a vault for you and stored another 600 galleons inside. He gave Tom a gentle reminder, try to manage it wisely. Thank you, Professor. I'll definitely use it well, Tom said with a grateful smile, though inwardly he was a little stunned at Dumbledore's generosity. That was more than enough to comfortably get him through all 7 years at Hogwarts, as long as he didn't blow it on luxury items like custom robes or a high-end broomstick. Dumbledore blinked, sensing something was off in Tom's tone, but couldn't quite place it. So he changed the subject. Let's go, Mr. Riddle. We still have quite a few things to buy. They left Gringotts and went shopping for school supplies: robes, textbooks, scales, a cauldron. Thanks to Dumbledore's presence, the shopkeepers were extra polite and even gave them discounts. Still, even with discounts, they spent over 40 galleons. Without them, it would have been closer to 50. And with the wand purchase coming up, Tom's fixed costs would total more than 60 galleons. If he'd only been allowed to exchange 70, he'd barely have anything left over. Getting through a semester would have been possible, sure, but it would have been tight. Food and lodging at Hogwarts were free, but there wouldn't be much wiggle room. Ron Weasley's yearly allowance was rumoured to be less than a galleon, so by comparison, Tom was practically a millionaire. Tom had already spotted several interesting books, all quite pricey. He planned to come back on his own later to buy them. With Dumbledore hovering around, he felt too self-conscious. He didn't want his every action being overanalyzed. Besides, he had no intention of sticking to just that 100 galleon allowance. He'd definitely dip into the vault money too. Why couldn't I have gotten a system or something? Tom thought with a sigh as they entered their last stop for the day, Ollivanders. Without a cheat code, he'd just have to study his way to power like a regular wizard. The moment they stepped in, Tom instinctively held his breath, not wanting to inhale the dust that puffed into the air as the door creaked open. Well, what a rare visitor, Albus, said a soft voice. From between tall shelves stacked with narrow boxes, an old man emerged. The last time you came into my shop was, 48 years ago? And yes, it was also summer. Dumbledore chuckled helplessly. Garrick, must you always show off that ridiculous memory of yours? It makes me unbearably jealous. Haha, my memory only works when it comes to wands and this shop. Garrick Ollivander walked up and gave Dumbledore a warm hug, then turned to look at Tom. And this must be the lucky young wizard who got Dumbledore himself as a guide. What's your name, dear boy? Tom, the boy said simply. Tom Riddle. Thud. Ollivander collapsed onto the floor, eyes wide in stunned disbelief as he stared up at the boy. Chapter 5, The Late Cheat. Garrick, did you not sleep well last night? You're wobbling like a baby deer, Dumbledore said quickly, stepping forward to help Ollivander to his feet. Smooth, and he even gave the old man a polite excuse. Albus, as sharp as ever, Ollivander chuckled, patting his chest. I was up half the night thinking about new wand materials. My head's still spinning. He clearly realized his reaction had been over the top and took the out Dumbledore offered, brushing it off with a smile. Then he turned to Tom with a gentle expression. But don't worry, my boy. Even if I were on my deathbed, I'd still find the perfect wand for you. It looked like Ollivander had accepted the coincidence of the name Tom Riddle, but inwardly, he was still shaken. After taking Tom's measurements, the first wand he handed over was made of yew. Dumbledore's eyelid twitched. Yew. A wood associated with life and death. Powerful, but often chosen by dark wizards. Ideal for curses and defense magic. The other Tom Riddle had used a yew wand too. As the wand fired a burst of flames from its tip, Ollivander quickly snatched it away with a frown and opened another box. That one was too gentle. Not quite the right fit. Try this. Tom took the second wand and a flurry of birds exploded from the tip. Still no good, Ollivander muttered, snatching it back. Thestral tail hair and you don't seem to get along. Let's try this one. Tom grasped the third wand, and the moment it touched his fingers, something clicked. It was effortless. He flicked it toward a broken flower pot in the corner. Boom, dust and shards. Future path detected. Anchoring initiated. Anchoring complete. Welcome, host. The ultimate study system is now online. Tom lowered his eyes slightly, expression unreadable, as if he hadn't heard anything at all. Meanwhile, Ollivander clapped his hands together, grinning. Perfect fit. 14.5 inches, you would, dragon heartstring core. I can already imagine the spells you'll cast with it. I'll use it well, Mr. Ollivander. Remember, a wand isn't just a tool, it's a partner, my boy. Then he added cheerfully, 8 galleons, please. Tom paid the fee, turning the wand over in his hands. There was no magical bonding moment or anything, but the way it cast spells so smooth, so natural was enough for now. Ollivander definitely knew his stuff. Maybe the whole wand chooses the wizard thing wasn't just a myth after all. Until a wizard reached a certain level of power, the fit of their wand could really affect how well they performed. With the simple wand care kit Ollivander handed him, Tom left the shop. The second the door closed behind them, the old wandmaker's pleasant smile vanished. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead. A wand over 13.5 inches? That's considered abnormally long. It usually means the wizard has an iron will and a powerful desire for control. Too short, and it indicates the opposite: pettiness, narrow-mindedness. Ollivander remembered the shortest wand he ever sold, to a witch named Umbridge. And the longest? The one he'd just handed to this Tom. Pair that with a dragon heartstring core, which only responds to witches and wizards with raw magical power. Albus, he muttered under his breath, placing scattered wand boxes back in their rightful spots. You know what this combination means, don't you? Ah, Mr. Riddle, I nearly forgot, Dumbledore said, pointing to the pet shop across the street. First years are allowed to bring one pet. Would you like to take a look? I'll pass, Professor, Tom replied, shaking his head. Owls are basically postal workers. I don't have much use for one. As for toads and rats, sorry, they're just not my thing. Dumbledore nodded, dropping the subject. Very well. That's everything for today, then. Let's grab a drink with Tom the barkeep, and then I'll take you home. Tom didn't object. They returned to the Leaky Cauldron. It was dinner time now, and only 2 seats were open, one of them saved just for them by the owner. Dumbledore's presence noticeably quieted the room. Still, he and Tom each just had a drink and didn't linger long. Sitting beside the old man, Tom suddenly understood why, in his past life, Dumbledore had always given off a certain loneliness. The man's status was simply too high. Everyone in the country treated him like a living legend. He was basically wizarding royalty. And like most royals, he was alone. At least a king has a queen. But Dumbledore? Well, he did have a queen once. And he put him in prison. The thought made Tom glance at the smiling old man beside him with just a twinge of pity. An hour and a half later, Dumbledore walked Tom back to the orphanage. "I look forward to seeing you again soon, Mr. Riddle." "Likewise, Professor." Once Dumbledore disappeared from sight, Tom finally stepped back into the building. Dinner was ready. Ms. Allman had already left for the night, and the other 4 boys were finishing up their meals. A big plate had been set aside just for Tom. "You really going to that weird school run by that old white-bearded dude?" Seth asked, the only one who stayed behind. The other boys, after greeting Tom with a nervous glance, scarfed down their food and vanished upstairs to wash dishes or hide in their rooms. They were new, and after getting thrashed once by Tom, they now treated him like a predator. Only Seth and Tom were permanent residents of the orphanage now. "That's none of your business," Tom said through a mouthful of steak. "But if I find out your grades dropped while I'm gone, don't be surprised if I come back during break and beat some sense into you." Seth shrank back, not daring to argue. But in his heart, he was pissed for Tom's sake. His big bro was the smartest, toughest guy in school. If anyone deserved to go to fancy schools like Eden, it was him. But the tuition was insane, and they couldn't afford it. That's the only reason Tom had to leave. Tom didn't know Seth was busy raging on his behalf. He didn't say much either. Dumbledore had warned him not to reveal anything about the magical world to muggles. No showing off magic stuff, no bringing magical items home. As a new student, Tom wasn't in a position to challenge those rules. After dinner, he cleaned his plate and returned to his room. "Open system panel," he said. System panel activated. Chapter 6, Andrus the Invincible. Tom took his time examining the system that had finally shown up. The Ultimate Study System, as the name suggested, was a tool designed to help him learn faster, better, and more efficiently. Basically, it turned him into a hyper-powered straight-A student. Any activity remotely related to learning or gaining knowledge would earn him study credits. That was the core mechanic of the whole thing. And those credits? They weren't just for a show. They had actual uses. Hiring a private tutor. The first hour each day was free, but after that, every additional hour cost 6 credits. Entering an enhanced learning state. Think turbo mode for your brain. Sharper focus, faster thinking, better memory, kind of like a mini epiphany. It cost 100 credits for 10 minutes, and each extra minute would cost him 10 more. Aside from credits, there was another key currency, achievement points. Tom could earn these by hitting major milestones: academic, personal, magical, whatever, by completing missions from the system. Achievement points had one major use, at least for now: summoning legendary teachers. Each tier of teacher had a different cost. B rank, your average, competent adult wizard 1 point. A rank, highly skilled 10 points. S rank, once in a generation talent 100 points. SS rank, best in a century 1000 points. SSS rank, legendary beyond time 5000 points. Even just looking at the prices made it clear how massive the gap was between each tier. One generation was roughly 30 years, so an S rank meant one of the most gifted people of their entire generation. An SS rank wizard? The best in 100 years. Legends like Dumbledore definitely qualified. But SSS rank? That kind of wizard didn't come around in just centuries. They were the stuff of magical history books. Back on the main menu, Tom noticed a floating gift box in the center of his interface. His newbie reward. When he opened it, the system gave him 100 study credits and 1 free teacher summon. The lowest tier he could get? S rank. Not a bad starting bonus at all. Still, he was curious. How exactly did the system summon these teachers? With a flick of his mind, Tom claimed all the rewards. A burst of golden light exploded in his vision like someone had shaken his brain around. When the spinning stopped, his consciousness had shifted into a thick, misty world. It felt real. So real, in fact, he almost believed he'd been teleported here, except he could still feel his body lying comfortably in bed back home. At the same time, the system fed him information about this new place. This was the study space. Time flowed the same as in the real world, but anything he learned here wouldn't tire him out physically. He could spend all night learning spells here and still wake up the next morning bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Even better, he could summon books and teaching materials he owned right into the space, making it feel like a supercharged version of a study room. Of course, just stepping into this space burned through study credits, kind of like paying for private lessons. And that 100 credit gift? It wouldn't last long. With the basics explained, Tom began scanning his surroundings, looking for his first summoned teacher. A loud, booming laugh echoed through the mist. The fog parted, doubling his field of vision, and through the haze came a towering figure striding confidently toward him. The man looked like he'd stepped straight out of ancient history. He wore a toga draped over one shoulder in the Greek style, his muscular chest mostly exposed. A laurel wreath sat on his head, and his features were sharp, almost statue-like one of those heroic marble sculptures from Athens come to life. He exuded strength and confidence. A glowing, masculine energy rolled off him like waves. The guy radiated power. His eyes swept the mist, then locked onto Tom with a widening grin. "So you're the little wizard who summoned me?" His voice was deep and enthusiastic. "Incredible. You've got the talent to pull my spirit out of centuries of sleep and the contract holding me here? Kid, you've got luck that's honestly making me a little jealous." The envy in his tone was obvious, but Tom didn't feel threatened at all. The system had made one thing very clear: anyone summoned into this space couldn't harm him. Not physically, not magically, not even sneakily. And they were required to share their knowledge openly and without deception. Even without that, Tom didn't think this man meant any harm. He was just too righteous. The guy practically glowed with moral clarity. Compared to him, even Dumbledore seemed a little shady. "Sir," Tom replied smoothly, "shouldn't a teacher introduce himself before asking questions?" The system hadn't revealed his identity yet, and Tom wasn't about to let that slide. The man let out another booming laugh, clearly enjoying himself. "Fair point. My bad for being rude on our first meeting. I'm Andras," he said, pounding a fist to his chest. "A humble wizard from ancient Greece. I've got a bit of experience with wandless magic and the Patronus charm. Should be enough to get you started." Tom's eyes widened slightly. That name sparked a memory. Back in Diagon Alley, Dumbledore had given him 2 chocolate frogs. Each came with a collectible famous wizard card. And one of those cards? Andras the Invincible. That wasn't just a nickname. Wizards back then had given him the title because he had never been defeated. Not once. He was famous for mastering wandless magic and casting giant-sized Patronuses without a wand. Even in modern times, no one had ever replicated that feat. He wasn't just some S-rank nobody. He was a bona fide SS-rank legend. A king of the century. No wonder Tom had taken a liking to him right away. The Patronus charm, after all, relied on powerful positive emotions and happy memories. That's why it was often used as a test to identify dark wizards. Andras? He was practically bursting with good vibes. A man like that, his soul practically shined. "Mr. Andras, I'm Tom Riddle," Tom said, smiling warmly. "It's an honor to meet you. I'll be your student from now on, so if I ever mess up or fall short, just let me know. You'll fix it right away." Even though the system made it so teachers had to help him, Tom always made a point to be respectful to those offering him guidance. A good attitude cost nothing and often paid off in the long run. Andras seemed to appreciate it. He pounded his chest again with a booming laugh. "Well said. I'll do everything I can to help you become an excellent wizard." Then, with a more serious tone, he added, "I'm guessing using this kind of power comes at a cost, right? No time to waste, let's begin right away." Tom nodded. He thought about how Hogwarts taught new students and decided to start with the basics. "Mr. Andras, I haven't started school yet. Why don't we begin with the simple spells like the wand lighting charm or the levitation charm?" Andras blinked at him, confused. "Levitation? Wand lighting? What are those?" Tom. Chapter 7, The Difference Between Modern and Ancient Magic. A heavy silence filled the learning space, the awkward tension between them growing by the second. Tom gave Andras a half-lidded look. And the towering, muscular man, the so-called mighty wizard, was suddenly avoiding his eyes like a guilty schoolboy, his face flushed red with embarrassment. Yet, it was exactly what it looked like. Andras wasn't messing with him. He genuinely had no idea what a wand lighting charm, Lumos, or a levitation charm, Wingardium Leviosa, was. The mystery unraveled quickly enough. Turns out, magical knowledge had evolved quite a bit since Andras's time. Sure, the wizarding world might seem old-fashioned and slow to change, but it wasn't static. It had progressed especially in terms of utility, convenience, and standardized spellcasting, even if that progress didn't always translate into more powerful wizards or a bigger population. Take Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1 by Miranda Goshawk, for example. The book Tom had just conjured. Before her, nobody had ever tried to categorize and compile spells in such an orderly, systematic way. According to her, both charms were developed around the 14th or 15th century. Which meant there was no way Andrus would have ever even heard of them. Tom couldn't help asking, then how did you light things up or move objects around back in your day? Instead of replying, Andrus conjured a wooden post, tossed a fireball at it, and instantly turned it into a blazing torch. For light, fire works just fine. As for moving objects, you just wrap them with your magical energy. Nothing complicated about it. Then he muttered, almost to himself, creating whole new spells just for trivial stuff like this, and even teaching them to others so casually. Back in Andrus's day, magic was raw, dangerous, and closely guarded. People treated it like a weapon you didn't just hand over to others lightly. Life was risky. No one had time to think about using magic for convenience or comfort. It was all about power, survival, and raw magical strength. Things only started changing during the Middle Ages, when Muggles rose in power and the Church began their infamous witch hunts. That's when wizards were forced to band together, founding magical academies and gradually developing the diverse, modern system of magic we see today. Andrus stared curiously at the book in Tom's hands. Tom, mind if I borrow that book? Maybe I'll recognize some of the spells. If not, I can start from the Patronus charm. I am pretty good at that one. Tom. Was this really a private tutor? Or had he just found himself a study buddy? The guy didn't know a single modern spell and wanted to start with the Patronus charm? The famous Expecto Patronum? Sure, Tom had a cheat-like system, but it wasn't that much of a cheat. He sighed. Forget it, Mr. Andrus. Tom handed over the book and conjured another one for himself. Let's just study together. I think you'll be impressed with how much magic has evolved. Thanks, Tom, Andrus said, scratching his head a bit sheepishly. He had just promised to guide the kid, and now he was the one asking for help. System notification, Teacher Andrus approval rating has reached 20%. Host has received the natural magical trait, Andrus's magic talent. Tom suddenly felt a rush of energy surge through him, a wide smile tugging at his lips. That was another perk of the system. Whenever a teacher's approval rating hit 20%, 50%, and eventually 100%, Tom would receive a reward, either a unique ability or a magical trait inherited from the teacher. Sure, learning was great. But in the magical world, talent was king. No amount of effort or resources could make up for a lack of born potential. With this system, though, Tom could surpass even the greatest teachers. Bit by bit, he was collecting their strengths, walking the path to becoming an unprecedented, unbeatable wizard. Tom took a moment to tidy up the learning space, conjuring a proper set of tables, chairs, a couch, and a coffee table. Then he and Andrus sat down with their matching standard spellbooks, Grade 1, and officially began their beginner-level magical studies. Thankfully, the space had already equipped Andrus with the ability to read modern English, otherwise, he wouldn't have understood a single word. To Tom's surprise, Andrus was taking this more seriously than he was. Even though the material was basic, it completely reshaped how Andrus saw magic. Back in his day, magic was for dueling. Fighting. Killing. That was it. But now? Magic had style. Andrus was no slouch, either. His mastery of the fundamentals was so deep that even basic theory came easily to him, like a university student revisiting first-grade math. It wasn't long before he started trying spells himself. And of course, he went straight to wandless casting. Tom, watching his progress, realized he needed to hurry up and buy the next few years' textbooks. Otherwise, Andrus was going to hit a ceiling real fast. Meanwhile, Tom began practicing the levitation charm. He carefully followed the pronunciation and wand movement described in the book. On his very first try, the feather floated gently into the air. But when he tried to guide its movement more precisely, he failed. That's when Andrus finally got to step in as an actual teacher. Try it again, he said calmly. Tom cast the spell once more. Andrus nodded. All right. So, the book gives you a solid foundation, but remember, magic is never truly standardized. Everyone's different. You'll learn the spell this way, sure. But it won't be the best way for you. You'll need to tweak the method a bit to really make it yours. Then, Andras conjured his own wand and demonstrated the levitation charm, flowing through the entire process smoothly. See that? My wrist barely moves 15 degrees less than what the book says. That's because I'm built like a brick wall. If I followed the book to the letter, I'd overdo it and the spell would fizzle. For you, though, you're still growing. Your motion should be a little wider. You'll have to test things out for yourself. No one, not even me, can tell you exactly what works best for you. Tom nodded slowly, a look of realization dawning on his face. Got it. He adjusted his technique several times, and before long, he was casting the levitation charm like a pro. 3 hours flew by. Finally, he said his goodbyes to Andras and exited the learning space. Even though all the physical fatigue vanished the moment he returned to the real world, Tom was still used to his sleeping time after years of routine. Plus, he only had 100 credits for now, which meant just 15 hours total in the learning space. Better to use them wisely. Chapter 8, Learning Efficiency. The next morning, Tom got up and casually opened the system pane lonely to do a double take. Instead of losing any credits from yesterday, he'd actually gained 18 credits and picked up 3 achievement points too. A quick scroll through the system log told him why. He'd completely mastered the charms yesterday. That earned him 30 credits and 3 achievement points. Tom paused, deep in thought. So, this learning space might actually be a self-sustaining machine? Just learning a few spells was enough to cover the cost of using it, and even turn a profit. If that was the case, he didn't really need to worry about burning through credits anymore. Still, he figured the real sink for credits would be the turbo buff. Right now, he only had enough credits to activate it for 10 minutes, barely long enough to get a taste, let alone see what it really did. What was it like, anyway? Would it make him fly? Turn him into some kind of magic prodigy? As those wild thoughts drifted through his mind, Tom got out of bed, washed up, and surprisingly didn't he head straight back into the learning space. Yesterday, he and Andras had run a few tests. Apparently, when Tom left the space, Andras had 2 choices, go dormant or move around freely. And if Tom left the space running, i.e., credits still being spent, Andras could even communicate with him and look through his eyes. Kinda like a Jinkra key? Still, it gave Tom an idea. He could buy and conjure all the textbooks into the learning space before going in himself. Andras could read them first, figure things out, and then teach him. That way, Tom could save a ton of time and credits. So, first thing in the morning, he headed out. After a bus ride to the city center, he passed through the leaky cauldron into Diagon Alley and made a beeline for the bookstore. Tom didn't know exactly what textbooks the upper years used, but thankfully, the shop assistants did. He flagged one down and explained what he needed. The clerk blinked at him in surprise. All the textbooks? Kid, you sure? You don't look older than a second year at most. No need to grab everything all at once. For example, with Defense Against the Dark Arts new professor every year. You won't even know what book they're using until class starts. Total waste if you buy it now. Such a kind, reasonable guy. Tom was almost certain he was a Hufflepuff. Knowledge is never wasted, Tom replied with a calm smile. Even if the books change, what I learn from them stays with me. Better to spend money on something useful than on toys or snacks. And if I don't need them later, I can always resell them. The clerk stared at him like he'd just heard a grown man talking through a kid's mouth. Still, if the customer insisted, he couldn't say no. He'd done his duty by giving a heads up. So, the clerk pushed over a trolley and went off to gather the books. After finding out Tom was a soon-to-be first year, he nodded approvingly. You'll definitely be sorted into Ravenclaw. Though personally, I still think Hufflepuff is the best house. Tom chuckled and nodded back. I think Ravenclaw suits me just fine. He had big goals, top of his class, top of the school. Among the 4 houses, Ravenclaw definitely matched his vibe the best. 10 minutes later, the trolley was piled high with thick, heavy tomes, not just the required textbooks, but a few extra books Tom had picked out himself. It wasn't until he got to the counter that he realized, he was short on funds. Just like in the Muggle world, textbooks priced like robbery. He remembered Aunt Almond complaining once. Her son was in university, and some of his textbooks cost dozens of pounds, some even hit triple digits. Might as well be robbing a bank. With a sigh, Tom made his way to Gringotts and withdrew another 200 galleons. Only then could he settle the bill. He also paid 10 sickles to have the books delivered by Owl. With his shopping done, Tom didn't bother wandering around Diagon Alley. Instead, he stopped by a nearby Waitrose, picked up some fruit and snacks, and headed straight home. Waitrose was a fancy supermarket, known for top quality, super fresh food. And while Tom might not be rich in the wizarding world, he had enough money in the muggle world to live comfortably, and he never saw the point in skimping on himself. His appetite was a little bigger than most kids his age, not outrageously so, but he burned a lot of calories with all his physical training. After all, who said you had to use magic to defend yourself? Sometimes, a solid punch did the trick, and it didn't hurt that he could shake down a few school bullies for protection money too. At 3 p.m., 3 owls flew in through the window, dragging his books behind them. Tom conjured the stack directly into the learning space, but didn't go in himself just yet. He wanted to test how much his learning efficiency dropped when he studied in the real world. Whew, that was exhausting. By 10 p.m., Tom flopped into bed, eyes shut tight with fatigue. On average, a person can only focus intensely for about 15 minutes at a time. Beyond that, attention starts to wander, and your mind goes off track. Do anything for over 2 hours, and frustration sets in. Efficiency nosedives, and eventually, nothing sticks at all. With breaks only for meals, Tom had been studying from 3 to 10 p.m. 7 hours, but only the first 2 hours had been really productive. After that, he was mostly just reading for the sake of it, treating his textbooks like storybooks instead of actually learning anything. By the end of the day, he'd only earned 30 study credits, roughly the same as what he'd gotten during 3 hours in the learning space. That decided it, no more wasting time. He'd save up the turbo buff for later, when he had more credits. But as for the learning space itself, that had to be used as efficiently as possible. With his plan set, Tom quickly drifted off to sleep. For the next month, Tom didn't step foot in Diagon Alley again. Every day, he split his time between training inside the learning space 5 hours a day under Andrus's guidance and practicing spells on his own in the real world. Time flew by, and before he knew it, it was the day before school started. Chapter 9, A Patronus Like a Gundam. We're finally going to Hogwarts, hey? I've been waiting forever for this. The one who said that wasn't Tom, it was Andrus. Over the past few weeks, Andrus had learned quite a bit about the modern magical world. At this point, you could say he was half a qualified modern wizard. What impressed him most were the legendary founders of Hogwarts. He often sighed wistfully, wishing he'd been born in their era. He couldn't say for certain what level the founders had reached as wizards, but Andrus was confident they had to be at least on par with himself, in other words, on the level of a best in a century, SS rank. Tom had once asked Andrus to evaluate his magical talent, but the answer he got was unclear. No doubt, Tom was gifted. Definitely top tier, a once-in-a-generation kind of prodigy. An S rank. But the gap between S rank and SS rank was huge. And based on the beginner-level spells Tom had learned so far, Andrus just couldn't make a final call. Maybe Tom was just a late bloomer? Still, that alone said a lot. Tom wasn't quite there yet, but he was somewhere between prodigy and best in a century. And that didn't bother Tom. His talent wasn't fixed, after all. He'd already gained Andrus's magical gift, and in the future, he'd collect even more, and stronger ones too. No need to rush. He glanced at his system panel. His bond with Andrus had grown quite a bit. His approval rating was now 46%. Just a few more points to hit 50 and earn another spin on the reward wheel. But what shocked Tom the most was learning Andrus's other name, Heracles. Tom had honestly thought he'd misheard. But Nondros was the Heracles of legend. To ancient people, a powerful wizard might as well have been a god. Their stories passed down through generations, twisted and dramatized into myth and legend. Still, Andrus had made it clear after reading modern Greek mythology, he absolutely did not have a creepy dad. His parents were ordinary wizards. He was just built different. Tom, you're ready to start learning the Patronus charm, Andrus said one day, patting Tom on the shoulder. He looked excited, almost eager to pass down one of his signature spells. The Patronus charm was undeniably advanced magic, requiring not just a strong magical foundation but a rock-solid will. Tom had the mental discipline in spades, easily outclassing most kids his age. And now, with Andrus's magical talent in his toolkit, power wasn't an issue either. I've been looking forward to this too, Andrus, Tom replied. That massive, warrior-like Patronus Andrus used? He wanted that. I'll give you a demo first, Andras said, stepping back and raising his wand high. Expecto Patronum. Silvery mist erupted from the tip of his wand, swirling and weaving until it took solid form into a gigantic, towering figure. Tom's eyes widened in disbelief. That's your Patronus. The thing was over 10 meters tall. And the most shocking part? It looked exactly like Andras. Ha 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 ha. Andras laughed heartily, clearly pleased with Tom's reaction. Surprised? Normally, Patronuses are animals, creatures that reflect a wizard's inner self. But I believe the only force that can truly protect you, is your own strength and conviction. Maybe that's why my Patronus took on my own form. I've refined it over time, till it's got all sorts of special properties now. It's especially effective against dark forces. He shot Tom a confident smile. If you follow my training method, there's a good chance your Patronus will be humanoid too. Tempting, hey? Tom nodded with way too much enthusiasm. Who wouldn't want that? Compared to otters, swans, or stags, a towering, human-shaped Patronus was way cooler. And if it could get to Andras's size? That was practically a Gundam. A silver, magical Gundam. With that kind of motivation, Tom dove into his training with renewed fire. He kept at it all the way until the next morning, only stopping when it was almost time to leave. After wolfing down 2 slices of bread, he grabbed his suitcase and headed off to King's Cross Station. The suitcase didn't look very big, but it had been enchanted with an extension charm. That spell had taken him 2 whole days to learn. It wasn't easy. He'd managed to triple the internal space, though any more would have made it unstable. The spell also wasn't permanent, it need to be recast about once a month. But for now, it worked. Was it illegal for an underage wizard to use that charm? Technically, yeah. Did Tom care? Not one bit. He was just a fresh-faced first year. No way he could have done something that advanced. Clearly, someone must have tampered with his suitcase to frame him. He is just a good Tom Riddle. 10 a.m. Tom arrived at King's Cross. The station was bustling. It was one of the busiest transport hubs in London, after all. Fun fact, the King's Cross name was meant to honor King George IV, who, frankly, didn't deserve it. Even his closest attendants had nothing nice to say about him. One even claimed, no dog on earth is more cowardly, vile, or useless than that king. Harsh? Maybe. But not undeserved. Tom honestly couldn't understand why anyone would want to memorialize such a loser. Yet there were still statues of him all over Britain. Shaking off the thought, Tom followed the crowd until he stood between platforms 9 and 10. Then, acting like it was the most natural thing in the world, he walked straight into the barrier. And emerged into a whole new world. A gleaming red steam engine stood at the crowded platform, its side marked with a sign, Hogwarts Express. Just one wall away, and yet it felt like crossing into another universe. Tom took a deep breath and stepped aboard the train, officially beginning his journey as yet another version of Tom Riddle. Chapter 10, The Hogwarts Express. The Hogwarts Express was set to leave at 11, but Tom arrived early. When he boarded the train, there were only a few other students scattered about. He made his way toward the last few compartments at the rear of the train. That way, when more students came on board, they wouldn't all be passing by his door and disturbing him. Stopping near the second-to-last car, Tom picked a random compartment. Andras's voice echoed in his mind. They really hid the Hogwarts Express inside a Muggle train station? Aren't they afraid of getting caught? Tom chuckled. Well, this is the biggest use of a Muggle repelling charm in wizarding history. The Ministry reinforces it every year. I'd bet repelling charms are the one spell every Ministry employee is guaranteed to master. We didn't even have a Ministry back in my day, Andras sighed. Things are so much more convenient now. Especially when it comes to keeping those rotten dark wizards in check. Tom nodded. Containing dark wizards is really just a form of self-preservation. Muggles today aren't anything like they were back then. If the magical world got exposed now, most wizards wouldn't stand a chance. That made Andras go quiet for a moment. Though he didn't look down on Muggles exactly, Andras did carry the arrogance that came with being a powerful wizard more so than most, really. He had been the strongest of his time, after all. Still, he never imagined that the same Muggles who once worshipped wizards as gods would advance so far enough to become a real threat. No wonder the books said the whole reason the Ministry was founded was to keep the magical world hidden from Muggles. As Andras lapsed into silence, Tom didn't press the topic. He flipped the page in his book and kept reading, content. He didn't have much time today to train with Andrus anyway. Opening the studying space was more to let the ancient relic take a look at the modern world than anything else. Just as the train began to fill up and the departure time crept closer, the compartment door slid open. A girl stood in the doorway, startled to find someone already inside. She had long, golden curls, big fluttering lashes, and eyes that blinked rapidly in surprise. But instead of leaving, she stepped in and asked a little shyly, "Do you mind if I sit here?" "Not at all," Tom said, giving her a polite nod before rising to help stow her bag. As he lifted it, he noticed that although the bag looked ordinary, the corners were stitched with dark gold trim, and there was an intricate crest embroidered into one of the sides. A family crest, no doubt. He immediately guessed she was from an old pure-blood family, probably someone important. She thanked him and sat across from him. But as Tom reopened his book, her gaze kept sneaking back toward him. "He's so good-looking." That thought popped into her mind and startled her enough to make her cheeks flush. She quickly looked away only for her eyes to wander back a second later, betraying her. It's practically a rule of the universe, anyone named Tom Riddle is guaranteed to be attractive. Tom's dark hair had a soft, natural wave to it. His deep-colored eyes were fixed intently on the book in his hands, and his features were strikingly sharp. The girl found herself mesmerized and slightly jealous. How could a boy have more delicate features than she did? His face could rival her younger sister's. When it became clear Tom wasn't going to start a conversation, she fidgeted a little before gathering the courage to speak. "Hi, I'm Daphne Greengrass. First year at Hogwarts." Tom closed his book and responded politely, "Tom Riddle. Also a first year." "Riddle?" Daphne mentally flipped through everything she knew about wizarding families. She couldn't remember ever hearing that surname before. "Are you half-blood?" she asked carefully. "Or maybe Muggle-born?" Tom gave a casual shrug. "Honestly? I've got no idea. My parents abandoned me when I was a baby. Maybe they were Muggles, maybe they were squibs. Doesn't really matter." He tilted his head slightly and smirked. "What's wrong, Miss Greengrass? Regretting sitting with me?" The Greengrass family, listed in Cantankerous Knots Sacred 28, was considered one of the finest examples of noble pure-blood lineage, low-key but extremely prestigious. Naturally, Tom assumed she'd be another Malfoy type, about to start ranting about blood purity. But what happened next surprised him. "No, no, no, please don't get the wrong idea." She waved her hands quickly, looking flustered. "I don't really care about all that. My mum always said every pure-blood family probably had Muggle ancestors at some point. I was just curious, that's all. I've never actually met anyone from the Muggle world before." Tom blinked. "Ah. Then I misunderstood. My apologies." "It's fine," Daphne said with a sincere shake of her head. Then she skipped right past the awkwardness and added, "My little sister's obsessed with Muggle fashion magazines. She found this old one years ago, but that's all she has. If it's not too much trouble, do you think you could help me get a few more sometime? I'd pay you for them, of course." "Sure, but you'll have to wait until Christmas break," Tom replied. Then something clicked in his memory. Daphne's younger sister, right, wasn't her name Astoria Greengrass? A quiet, forgettable girl who ended up marrying Draco Malfoy. She had some kind of health issue too and didn't live very long. Not that Tom would ever mention that. Instead, he followed Daphne's lead, letting her steer the conversation. She asked all sorts of questions about the Muggle world, and he answered them one by one. At one point, she even pulled out a quill and parchment to take notes, saying she wanted to write to her sister about everything. From those little moments, it was obvious Daphne really loved her sister. At some point, the train began to move, heading west toward the Scottish Highlands. The rhythmic clack of the wheels didn't interrupt their conversation at all. Andrus popped back into Tom's mind with a sudden comment. "I'd bet you a galleon that girl's already got a crush on you." "No, wait, not just a crush. She's drooling over how you look. Wants your body. Run, Tom. Run." Chapter 11, Hermione Granger. Andrus suddenly speaking up made Tom jump a little. He shot back mentally, annoyed, "Do you even have a galleon, Andrus? She's only 11. What does she even know about liking someone?" Tom didn't mention himself in that sentence, of course, but the idea of falling in love with an 11-year-old? Yeah, no thanks. Ridiculous. Though, raising one for a few years didn't sound entirely out of the question. Back in my day, people got married and had kids by 13 or 14. Some even younger. Andras sounded completely unfazed. Tom snorted. Really? And how about you, Mr. In my day? That hit the mark. Andras went dead silent, clearly a bit wounded. Truth was, Andras had been a magic-obsessed battle junkie in his time. Women were just distractions from his pursuit of magical power. Even when he died, he was still very much single. His immense magical talent had died with him. What a waste. If he'd passed it on, he probably would have founded a legendary magical family. To be fair, the magical world's obsession with bloodlines wasn't totally baseless. Powerful wizards did often leave behind magical knowledge and talents that could be inherited. It gave pure-blood families a leg up in terms of legacy and power. Look at the Gaunts or the rest of the Sacred 28. Their ancestors were seriously formidable. Tom smirked to himself as Andras sulked and even shut off the studying space in embarrassment. He turned his attention back to Daphne, who was still firing off questions like a curious little puppy. Meanwhile, he also took the chance to casually steer the conversation and fish for info. The poor girl didn't stand a chance against someone like him. Before long, she'd practically laid out the entire Greengrass family history on a silver platter. For example, her mother was the head of the Department of Magical Transportation. Her grandmother? Also the head of the Department of Magical Transportation. Great-grandmother? Same gig. Apparently, the Greengrass family had a tradition of marrying in, and for the last 300 years, they'd only had daughters. And when Daphne pouted about only getting 200 galleons of pocket money per term, Tom's heart skipped a beat. Marrying in? Pfft, not a problem. Hogwarts had 3 terms per year. That meant Daphne's annual allowance was 600 galleons. That was almost as much as Dumbledore had given him to last 7 years. She wasn't just a rich girl, she was a soft, adorable little rich girl. What was there not to like? Without even realizing it, Tom found himself warming up to her. After some time, the compartment door slid open again. A smiling woman peeked in. Anything off the trolley, dears? Yes, please. Daphne practically bounced to her feet and skipped over to the trolley like an excited child. Calling it choosing was generous. He basically bought one of everything, varying the amounts, and completely cleaned out all the chocolate frogs. The total came to 2 galleons and 13 sickles, more than the Weasley family spent on an entire year of pocket money. Suddenly, Tom understood why she complained about her 200 galleons not being enough. At this rate, she'd blow through it in a month. As Daphne paid, Tom took the chance to observe the trolley witch carefully. According to rumors, she'd been working on the Hogwarts Express since its maiden voyage in 1830. That would make her at least 180 years old. Even by wizarding standards, that was pushing it. Tom wasn't content to just look with his own eye. She called Andras out of his sulk to help investigate. But even with 2 pairs of eyes, they couldn't find any signs that she was anything more than a long-lived, ordinary witch. In the end, Tom let it go. Back in the compartment, Daphne cheerfully laid out the mountain of sweets she'd bought and insisted on sharing everything with Tom. He didn't even hesitate to accept. If he didn't have the shamelessness to eat a little soft-funded candy, he could forget about ever eating soft-funded meals. As they ate and chatted, the conversation turned to the sorting. My whole family's been in Slytherin, Daphne said with a shy smile. So I'll probably end up there too. But I think the other houses are fine too. My mum won't be mad as long as I don't get put in Gryffindor. Tom raised a brow. What's with the Gryffindor hate? Mum says they're the source of all problems. Daphne wrinkled her nose in distaste. Wherever there's a Gryffindor, there's chaos. You never know what kind of trouble they'll stir up. Tom thought about that. Honestly? Fair point. That sounded exactly like something the Lady Greengrass would say, and probably very accurate. Tom. Daphne's voice dropped a bit, and she looked nervous. You don't want to be in Gryffindor, do you? She must have thought he was offended and instantly regretted her earlier comment. No worries. Tom chuckled. I'm hoping for Ravenclaw, maybe Hufflepuff. Somewhere quiet. Good for her studying. You love learning that much? You'll definitely make it into Ravenclaw. Daphne beamed at him, completely sincere. Just then, a loud shriek echoed from outside their compartment. Neither of them paid it much mind, they were finishing up their lunch and ready for a little nap. But soon after, someone knocked at the door. Before either of them could answer, the door slid open. "Have either of you seen a toad?" "Wait, Tom Riddle. What are you doing here?" A bushy-haired girl with large front teeth and a very expressive face stood frozen in the doorway. She looked like she'd just seen a ghost. Behind her, a chubby boy stood trembling. Daphne was already frowning at the girl's rudeness, but now her entire face scrunched in irritation when she realized the girl knew Tom. Tom, for his part, was as calm as ever. He looked up casually and said, "Miss Granger. If you're allowed to ride the Hogwarts Express, why wouldn't I be here?" "And no. That's not what I meant." Hermione Granger stumbled over her words, flustered. "I just meant this is great." And just like that, Daphne's expression went completely dark. She suddenly had the awful feeling that her new favorite toy might be about to get stolen. Chapter 12, The Arrival at Hogwarts. Thanks to this Miss Granger, Tom had been able to confirm the nature of this world several years earlier than expected. Ever since that math competition back then, Tom had run into Hermione at various academic contests for primary schoolers. He was there for the prize money and school rewards. Hermione? She was there purely out of interest. Her interest was studying. But no matter how passionate she was, there was no way passion alone could beat Tom's desperation to survive. So out of the dozen or so times they'd competed, Tom had won almost every single time. The one time he lost was at a school sports event three-legged race. His teammate, an absolute idiot who couldn't coordinate his legs and dragged him down the whole time. Hermione had assumed their little rivalry would end once she went off to Hogwarts. But then bam! There he was, on the train. Tom Riddle, sitting right there in the flesh. And apparently going to Hogwarts, too? After a moment of shock, she was absolutely buzzing with excitement. This meant she still had a chance to beat him. Right then and there, Hermione completely forgot why she'd come to this compartment in the first place. She didn't even notice Daphne's expression darken. "Riddle, I already finished Modern Magical Theory, The Rise and Fall of the Dark Arts, Great Magical Events of the 20th Century, and most of our supplementary reading over the summer. What about you?" "Oh. And I've already learned some basic spells. Which house do you want to be in?" "I'm aiming for Gryffindor. Heard it's the best." Tom closed his eyes. It felt like 100 birds were all chirping at once next to his ear. When she finally paused to breathe, he took the chance to point at the chubby boy still standing awkwardly in the doorway, on the verge of tears. "Granger, didn't you come here with your friend? And for the record, we haven't seen any toads. Maybe try another compartment." Hermione turned around and blinked in surprise. She gave the boy an apologetic smile. "Sorry, Longbottom. I got a bit excited and forgot." "And no problem," Neville stammered. "We'll talk later, Riddle. Don't fall too far behind or it won't be satisfying when I beat you." With that totally not threatening declaration, Hermione whisked Neville away on her quest to find his lost toad. The moment the door slid shut, Daphne scowled. "Tom, who was that?" She was so rude. From the moment Hermione walked in, she hadn't even looked at Daphne, let alone greeted her. Then there was that arrogant, know-it-all tone. Yeah, Daphne was seriously annoyed. "A friend from competitions," Tom said with a chuckle. "That's just how Granger is. She's competitive, but there's no malice in it. You'll get used to her." "I don't want to get used to someone with no manners," Daphne huffed. "No wonder she wants to be in Gryffindor. She's totally one of those brainless, Mum warned me about." Tom raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Honestly, Daphne wasn't wrong. First year Hermione, or actually, Hermione most of the time wasn't exactly easy to get along with. If Tom remembered right, she managed to clash with nearly everyone at some point: roommates, Ginny, Luna, even Harry and Ron. Those two only forgave her because they were too laid back to hold grudges. Otherwise, she probably wouldn't have made any close friends at all. Not wanting Daphne to dwell on it, Tom casually changed the subject. Later on, Hermione came back for another chat, but by then, Daphne had fallen asleep. Tom quietly gestured for silence, and Hermione resentfully left again. As the sky darkened and the train started to slow, Tom knew they were getting close. He gently nudged Daphne awake. She blinked sleepily, her eyes full of confusion before she realized where she was. Tom, are we there yet? Yeah, the train's slowing down. Often we'd better get our robes on. She scrambled to her feet, only to feel something wet at the corner of her mouth. She wiped it and her face turned bright red. She drooled. Oh no. Did Tom see? That's so embarrassing. Does he think I sleep in a weird position? What if he thinks I'm gross? Unaware of the minor crisis going on inside Daphne's head, Tom just found it curious how chatty she'd been before her nap, only to suddenly turn all shy and quiet now. With a loud whistle, the train finally came to a halt. The students poured out, where Hagrid's booming voice called for all first years to gather in line. They were taking the boats across the lake to get to Hogwarts. Tom and Daphne ended up on the same boat with 2 other kids. Tom did a quick head count. This year's incoming class looked to be around 80 to 90 students. Maybe just under 100. That meant the school wasn't as empty as he'd assumed. If you added up all 7 years, Hogwarts probably had around 600 students altogether. Author's note, this is during Voldemort's dark reign. Birth rates among wizarding families are really low. But in other years, student numbers will increase. The upper limit of the school population is around 1,000. As they approached a rocky cliff, Hagrid called out for everyone to duck, but really, it was only necessary for him. Legend had it that this path was the same one the 4 founders of Hogwarts took when they first arrived, which was why every new class of first years had to take it too. A tradition of sorts. Eventually, the boats reached the dock. The students climbed out and followed Hagrid up a flight of stone steps until they stood before a massive oak door. Hagrid knocked 3 times with his giant fist. The door opened with a creak, revealing a tall witch in emerald green robes. Her expression was stern. The students instantly went quiet, like mice facing a very large cat. First years, Professor McGonagall, Hagrid said, gesturing to the cluster of tiny witches and wizards. Thank you, Hagrid. I'll take it from here. McGonagall gave a small nod, then pulled the doors open wider, leading the first years into a warm and brightly lit entrance hall. Chapter 13, The Sorting Ceremony. As the new students stepped into the entrance hall, they could already hear the buzz of conversation and laughter coming from the doors to their right. Returning students were already seated, waiting eagerly for the start of term feast to begin. I am Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress of Hogwarts and Head of Gryffindor House, came a crisp, authoritative voice. Professor McGonagall stood before them, introducing herself with an impressive string of titles that immediately made the young witches and wizards straighten up a little taller. Once she was sure she had their full attention, she continued. Before we begin the feast, we'll be holding the sorting ceremony. This will determine which of the 4 houses Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, or Slytherin you will join. It's an important tradition. For the next 7 years, you'll be learning, living, and growing alongside your housemates. Your actions will also affect your house's standing. If you break school rules, points will be deducted. Her gaze sharpened suddenly, the temperature in the hall seeming to drop a few degrees. And let me be perfectly clear, though I am head of Gryffindor House, I will not go easy on anyone who breaks the rules. In fact, I'll make sure your punishment is twice as severe. A collective shiver ran through the group of first years. Some of those who'd been hoping to join Gryffindor were now nervously reconsidering. She's terrifying. But fear of McGonagall wasn't the only thing weighing on their minds. The mysterious sorting ceremony had many of them on edge. Those from wizarding families had been warned in ominous tones, some even told scary stories about it. As for the Muggleborns, they didn't even have those mysterious legends to fall back on. The fear of the unknown was far worse. A few students were already imagining the worst. What if none of the houses wanted them? One girl was so overwhelmed she nearly burst into tears. Tom noticed that Daphne beside him was muttering something under her breath, though her voice was too quiet to make out. Seeing how pale and jittery the kids looked, Professor McGonagall allowed herself the faintest smile. Her strict demeanor softened just a little as she added in a gentler tone. There's no need to worry. From the moment you received your acceptance letter, you were officially students of this school. The sorting ceremony is simply a way to find the house that suits you best. That's all. Think of Hogwarts as your home. And what kind of home would ever throw you out? Her words had a soothing effect. The tension in the room eased. Nervous frowns gave way to tentative smiles. But not everyone took her words at face value. Not far from Tom, a blonde boy perked up with a flash of inspiration. Professor McGonagall, did you say the school is our home? Indeed I did, young man, she replied, nodding solemnly. The boy's eyes lit up as he dramatically clutched his stomach. Then what are we waiting for? I'm starving. Can't we eat before the sorting? McGonagall's expression darkened in an instant. Do you think this is your house? The rules apply to everyone, and we are not making exceptions just because you're hungry. Once you've been sorted, your house will lose 5 points for insolence. The boy gasped. Professor! You lied to me. Tom. Hannah Abbott. The sorting had begun. A rosy-cheeked girl with 2 neat blonde braids stepped forward nervously and placed the sorting hat on her head. After only a brief pause, the hat bellowed out, Hufflepuff. The table on the far right erupted in applause and cheers. Students waved her over, and even the fat friar, the Hufflepuff ghost, floated up gleefully and doffed his hat in welcome. Tom smiled, watching Hannah stumble a little on her way to the table. Perfect. The world hadn't gone too far off course. That meant his knowledge of what was supposed to happen still had value. Good girl. Tom murmured under his breath, almost to himself. But someone did hear him. Daphne. Wait a second. That's his type? Hannah Abbott. She looks like she just wandered in from a potato farm. She stole a glance at Hannah, then looked back at Tom, who seemed lost in thought, eyes fixed on the sorting hat. Daphne was speechless. Truth be told, Tom was zoning out. He couldn't help wondering where he would be sorted. Slytherin was off the table. With his completely Muggle background, Tom didn't think it was even an option. That left 3 house and the one he most wanted to avoid was Gryffindor. If he ended up there, he'd be too close to Harry, which would basically put him under Dumbledore's microscope 24/7. And given his name, well, that was attention he really didn't want. Tom wasn't trying to be a villain or anything, but he sure didn't want to be watched like a ticking time bomb. And Daphne had a point. Gryffindor was chaos incarnate. Trouble seemed to follow them like a curse. He had no intention of being caught up in all that nonsense. He wanted peace. Quiet. Top grades. Gryffindor was not the place for a future academic legend. Of the remaining 2, Ravenclaw was easily his first choice. But Hufflepuff wasn't bad either. After all, who could say no to a house with a kitchen right there, and house elves serving hot meals all day? Daphne Greengrass. Finally, the hat called Daphne. The young witch was so nervous she practically sprinted up to the stool. She placed the sorting hat on her head and after a tense minute of silence, it shouted. Slytherin. The Slytherin table burst into applause far louder than they had for any student before her. A few kids earlier had received only polite clapping. Daphne wasn't just any student. The Greengrass family was one of the sacred 28 pureblood royalty. The big-name families weren't shy about showing their approval. A few more names were called in quick succession. Then came the one that silenced the entire hall. Harry Potter. The moment his name was read, every single student fell still, holding their breath. When the sorting hat finally announced Gryffindor, the table second from the right exploded. Students whooped, clapped, and cheered louder than ever before. A pair of red-haired twins were so excited they nearly jumped onto the table. Meanwhile, the Slytherin table went ice cold. Whispers started up immediately. Some students were staring at Harry with unreadable expressions. Others were mouthing things too quietly to hear. In the midst of this heavy, electric atmosphere, Professor McGonagall read out the next name, her voice low and steady. Tom Riddle. To most of the students, it was just another name. Only Hermione and Daphne were paying close attention to him. But up at the staff table, the effect was like a thunderclap. Several teachers stiffened, their faces pale. For the faculty, that name meant only one thing. Disaster. Chapter 14, Born to be a Slytherin. There are no real secrets in the wizarding world. Nothing ever disappears without leaving a trace. Even something as hidden as a Horcrux can be unraveled and uncovered, layer by layer. Dumbledore had found them all, one by one. 60 years ago, the name Tom Riddle had shone brightly at Hogwarts like a star. But 30 years ago, that same name became a dreaded whisper no one dared to speak aloud. Back then, Dumbledore was the Transfiguration Professor. Flitwick was already teaching charms. Sprout and McGonagall hadn't yet joined the staff, but given their ties to Dumbledore and the Order of the Phoenix, he'd surely have filled them in on the essentials. And Snape, once Voldemort's most loyal servant, now his most bitter enemy, had made sure every detail had been investigated and documented. As for Hagrid, the poor half-giant was trembling the most, his face pale as chalk. He had been a student alongside Tom Riddle all those years ago. Naive as he was, he'd once thought Tom was a good person. And he wasn't the only one who was rattled. Professor Quirrell, who had been trying to shrink into his robes under Snape's watchful eye, suddenly looked up. His eyes locked on Tom as he walked toward the Sorting Hat. Snape didn't even notice that. His gaze was only filled with hate. Not for this Tom. Noel, yes, but not quite. It was for another Tom. Severus. Dumbledore's lips barely moved. Only Snape could hear him. There are many people in the world who share a name. A name is just a label, it doesn't define the person. Don't let it cloud your judgment. TCH. Snape didn't reply. He just scoffed under his breath. Did Dumbledore think he didn't know who he'd gone to fetch over the summer? He'd assumed the old man was bringing in Harry Potter himself, but no. He'd sent Hagrid. And besides Harry Potter, the only person who could stir up this much interest from Dumbledore was Tom Riddle. Some of the smarter students started to pick up on the professor's strange reactions. The great hall slowly fell silent. By the time Tom reached the stool, the room was dead quiet. Riddle. Just put the hat on, said Professor McGonagall, lips pressed tightly together. She never thought she'd get the chance to teach a Tom Riddle. Tom gave a small nod, sat down, and lifted the hat. He could swear on Merlin's silky tights that the Sorting Hat didn't even touch his head properly before it shrieked, like someone was choking it. Slytherin. Born to be in Slytherin. McGonagall blinked. Snape frowned. Dumbledore said nothing. Tom was stunned. He stood there on the stool, blinking down at the sea of students craning their necks to look at him, his mind going completely blank. How the hell did I end up in Slytherin? He wasn't pure blood. He wasn't even a half-blood. He had zero ambition for power. So why on earth was he placed in Slytherin? Was this some kind of twisted fate, Tom Riddle's curse? In the studying space, Andraso had been silently observing everything, was laughing so hard he nearly passed out. He knew exactly what Tom had planned, even had backup options prepared for ending up in Gryffindor. But Slytherin? That wasn't in the plan. Just as McGonagall opened her mouth to tell Tom to join his house table, the boy suddenly jammed the Sorting Hat back onto his head. We need to talk, he said firmly in his mind. Oh? What about? The hat replied calmly. Your sorting is already complete, young wizard. You didn't even touch my head properly. You must have been echoing Harry Potter's result. He's the boy who lived, last of the Potters pure-blooded. Of course he's a great fit for Slytherin. Tom didn't care anymore. He threw Harry straight under the bus. Wrong, the Sorting Hat snapped, now clearly annoyed. Don't question my expertise, Riddle. I've never made a mistake. Ever. I may be old, but I'm sharp and your result is Slytherin. No doubt about it. But that doesn't make any sense. There's nothing magical about this choice. Why the hell would I be in Slytherin? He refused to accept it. The hat picked up on his disbelief, its tone shifting into a gleeful hum. Let's see, an unbreakable ambition to be the strongest, a stubborn will that won't rest until goals are met, and oh. Magic even more ancient and potent than Salazar's or Godric's. If Salazar Slytherin were alive today, he'd be begging you to be his apprentice. Tom clenched his jaw. He didn't remember applying for Evil Sorcerer of the Year. You're slandering me, Hat. Don't students get a say in their house? I strongly request to be put in Ravenclaw, he demanded. Request denied, the Hat said cheerfully. Now get a move on, I've got a line to get through. If you're really that upset, drop by Dumbledore's office later. I'll chat with you for a few galleons. Fine, how about Hufflepuff? I'm Muggle-born, super friendly, love making friends. I am practically the poster boy for Hufflepuff. Tom tried desperately to sell himself. There was a long pause. Then the Hat spoke again, this time soft and almost gentle. Kid, you can have nothing in life but never lose self-awareness. Please, take a long, honest look at who you really are, okay? Stupid Hat. One day, I swear, I'm stitching that mouth shut. Tom seethed. The Sorting Hat clearly caught that lovely little thought and shouted loud enough for the whole hall to hear. Slytherin. Slytherin. Tom Riddle belongs in Slytherin. Whatever Tom was going to say next was cut off as McGonagall swiftly removed the hat. Mr. Riddle, the sorting is over. If you have any concerns, you may bring them up later. Tom forced a smile that looked more like a grimace, gave her a polite nod, and crawled toward the Slytherin table. No one clapped at first. Everyone was still shell-shocked by him putting the hat back on like that. Maybe he just wanted to make the moment last longer? Some students whispered uncertainly. It wasn't until Daphne Greengrass beamed at him and started clapping that the rest of the Slytherins joined in, hesitantly at first. Tom took the opportunity to sit beside her. I honestly didn't think you'd end up in Slytherin, she whispered excitedly. This is so great, now we can take classes together. Yet. I didn't think so either, Tom replied weakly. A few more students were sorted after him. The last was Blaise Zabinai, who naturally also ended up in Slytherin. Only then did Tom realize this was the same kid who had actually believed McGonagall's speech earlier and treated the whole school like his home. Chapter 15, Nitwit. Blubber. Oddment. Tweak. We need to talk. Snape was replaying the scene from earlier over and over. The more he thought about it, the more uneasy he felt. That Tom Riddle kid. Could he be some sort of magical reincarnation of Voldemort? The sorting hat's speed doesn't necessarily reflect a wizard's strength or potential, but it does reveal parts of a young wizard's personality and mindset. And Snape had never seen anyone get sorted into Slytherin that fast. Maybe if Salazar Slytherin himself rose from the grave, then it would make sense. So what did that mean? It meant Tom Riddle was the perfect fit for Slytherin, so much so that even as head of the house, Snape didn't see that as a good thing. But Dumbledore didn't seem concerned at all. Looking at Blaise Zabinai, who had found his house, the headmaster stood up with a bright smile. Welcome, welcome. Both new and returning students, welcome back to Hogwarts for a brand new year. I'd just like to say, nitwit. Blubber. Oddment. Tweak. Thank you all. With that, Dumbledore gave a small bow and sat right back down. The hall exploded in thunderous applause. Tom clapped along too. What the hell did he just say? Inside the learning space, Andrus looked completely lost. I didn't get a word of that, why is everyone clapping? Tom shrugged, amused. Honestly? Just ending the speech earns applause in my book. As he spoke, the once empty golden plates in front of them magically filled with food. Roast lamb, lamb chops, crispy fries, mashed potatoes, rich meat gravy, creamy mushroom soup, garlic bread, savory mutton pies, all steaming and fragrant, practically calling out to the young witches and wizards. Tom didn't hold back. He reached for some ribs and chicken wings, then ladled a full bowl of mushroom soup and dug in. Sure, he and Andrus had devoured most of the snacks Daphne bought on the train, but everyone knows snacks never truly fill you up. When hunger hits, it hits. People always say British food is awful, just deep-fried nonsense and bland mystery meat, but Hogwarts meals were closer to traditional Scottish comfort food, heavy on herbs, butter, and slow-cooked broths. They even mixed in some French dishes. That creamy mushroom soup? A total French classic. The food was actually pretty tasty, way better than anything Tom had back at the orphanage. Meanwhile, Andrus was still stuck on something. Wasn't his speech super short and kind of hard to follow? Tom snorted mid-bite. Clearly, you've never been trapped in a room listening to some pompous idiot ramble for an hour and a half. Don't be fooled into thinking long-winded speeches were rare, hell no. Every time Tom won some award, out came a headmaster or chairman, ready to drone on forever. The speeches weren't really for the crowd. They were aimed at the journalists' present sound bites meant to land in the paper the next day and score political points for future elections. Back in the 90s, before social media took over, newspapers were everything to British politicians. That was gospel truth. Fair enough, Andrus muttered. Still, your headmaster seems kind of nuts. But I can tell he's really powerful. There's a certain intuition strong people have around each other, like how even when Voldemort felt he had no rivals left, he still feared Dumbledore, despite the fact they'd never actually fought. That fear came from sensing danger, a real threat. So, who was stronger, you or him? Tom asked, suddenly intrigued. Power comparisons never got old. Wizard duels aren't just about how much magic you have or how flashy your spells are, Andrus said calmly. But I can tell you these, we are kinda on the same level. And if it came down to a proper duel, there's no way I'd lose to anyone. That was the confidence of someone who'd once ruled the wizarding world and never tasted defeat. Tom gave a small nod and left it at that. He didn't feel like chatting more. By the second half of the feast, most students were full, casually nibbling on dessert and chatting with friends. At one point, a second-year boy leaned over, curious about what Tom and the Sorting Hat had talked about. But the moment he found out Tom was Muggle-born, his face changed. Without a word, he turned away and ignored him. Word of Tom's background spread quickly along the Slytherin table. Soon, all kinds of stares were aimed at him, none of them friendly. Tom didn't seem bothered, but Daphne looked visibly worried. She had a bad feeling about Tom ending up in Slytherin. Still, she leaned in and whispered, "Slytherins care a lot about blood, but as long as you're strong, you can do whatever you want." Seeing an 11-year-old girl trying to comfort him made Tom chuckle. "I'm an orphan. This stuff? I've been dealing with it all my life. I'll be fine." Instead of easing her worries, Daphne's eyes grew glassy with unshed tears. She looked like she was about to cry. Panicking a bit, Tom quickly changed the subject, talking about what life at Hogwarts might be like. Finally, the plates cleared themselves with a shimmer, once again gleaming and spotless. Dumbledore stood up again and went over some new rules, especially emphasizing how dangerous breaking them could be. 3/4 of the time, his gaze was locked on the Gryffindor table, more specifically, a pair of identical twins. The twins didn't look the least bit guilty. In fact, they winked and made goofy faces at Dumbledore, which actually made the old man chuckle. Only after Professor McGonagall shot them a warning glare did Dumbledore ask everyone to rise and sing the Hogwarts school song. Golden ribbons floated in the air, spelling out the lyrics. When the final note faded, Dumbledore wiped at the corners of his eyes and told the students to head back to their dorms and rest. He, meanwhile, made his way to the top of the castle. Snape quietly followed him. Chapter 16, The Slytherin Way. Headmaster's Office. Dumbledore had kindly prepared a glass of honey water for Snape, but Snape barely took a sip before setting the cup down with a grim expression. "You're sure this isn't some trick from the Dark Lord? Like a magical resurrection, body possession, or something equally disturbing?" "Pfft!" Dumbledore chuckled, unable to hold back his laughter. "Severus, I never realized you had such a sharp sense of humor. You should try cracking jokes like that more often. It might just improve your reputation with the other staff." Snape's scowl deepened. If he wasn't certain he'd lose, he'd have shown the old man exactly what kind of fury the Half-Blood Prince could unleash. "With wizards like you two, nothing would surprise me," Snape snapped coldly. Dumbledore just shook his head with a sigh. "Severus, you underestimate yourself and overestimate both me and Voldemort. Yes, he's certainly developed some disturbing and dangerous magic. But Hogwarts isn't so easily fooled. The founders designed this school to reject the same individual trying to enter twice under different identities." Snape's eyes narrowed as the realization dawned. As a head of house, he knew how Hogwarts magically sought out potential students across Britain. If this Tom Riddle were the same one from before, there's no way he'd have been allowed to enroll again under the radar. "Still, keep an eye on that boy," Dumbledore advised. "I didn't expect him to end up in Slytherin, and I imagine your house's environment might stir up some issues." "Survival of the fittest," Snape replied without a hint of empathy. "Even as head of house, I don't interfere with student affairs more than necessary. That's the unspoken rule of Slytherin. It's what keeps the house strong." Slytherin, after all, valued hierarchy and power more than any other house. It was a closer reflection of the real world. Even if he had the power to intervene, Snape had little interest in wasting his energy on someone he viewed as insignificant. With Harry Potter arriving this year, Quirrell's personality shift, and that familiar aura lingering around, Tom hardly made the priority list. "No, Severus, I think you've misunderstood me," Dumbledore corrected gently. "I'm not saying Riddle might get into trouble. I'm saying the other Slytherins might. This boy isn't Tom, but they're alike in many ways. He's extremely gifted in magic. And thanks to his background, he's learned to protect himself through force. If things do escalate, let's just hope he holds back." Snape. To be fair, Dumbledore wasn't wrong. Not even the first day. Technically, the night before classes began, Tom had already started educating his new roommates. After the feast, the Slytherin students filed back to their common room. There were 12 first-year boys, neatly divided into groups of 4. Malfoy shared a dorm with his 2 ever-present flunkies, along with a boy named Monet Selwyn. Tom's room? Blaise Zabinai, Not, and Rosier. And the moment they stepped into the dorm, Zabanai didn't even try to hide his disdain. Ugh! Just my luck, stuck in the same room as a mudblood wizard. Hey, Riddle! Go make my bed. Use the sheets I brought, those school ones are trash. And grab mine too. Nod added with a smirk. And fetch me some water. Chop chop. Rosier and Nott burst into laughter as they joined in the bullying. Tom let out a quiet sigh. Honestly, he expected this the moment he was sorted into Slytherin. Just didn't think it would start this soon. He hadn't planned for it, but that only meant he could trust his instincts. With a flick, Tom drew his wand and turned around. Boom! An invisible shockwave erupted between the three boys, slamming them against the wall. Before they could even recover, Tom's wand flicked toward the overturned pen cup. 3 quills shot out and twisted midair into ropes, binding the trio tightly. Then with a smooth swish, his wand extended and softened, turning into a whip. Swish! Aa! Zabanai let out a scream as the lash struck his back. Goosebumps broke out all over his body. The other two didn't escape either. Tom gave them equal attention. For a while, the dorm looked less like a bedroom and more like a twisted game of human spinning tops. Tom finally stopped after getting bored. I thought Slytherins were supposed to be cunning, ambitious, and smart. What kind of idiots are you? He said coldly. You tried to bully someone without even checking who they were first. Did you really think I'd just take it? Tom, pure bloods, hey. Cute. Wah. I'm telling my mum. You're getting expelled. Put me down, Riddle. Let me go. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Please don't hit me again. At the end of the day, they were still 11-year-olds. All that pure blood supremacy nonsense had been spoon-fed to them by their parents. They didn't actually understand it. But pain? Pain speaks every language. Tom gave them each another guaranteed 10 rounds of discipline. Soon enough, the three of them had quieted down considerably. He released the bindings, and the three Zabanai, Rosier, and Nott immediately dropped to their knees before Tom. From now on, Tom said, his voice calm but firm, I make the rules in this dorm. Anyone who breaks them gets the whip. Or, his lips curled into a smirk, I'll strip you and hang you at the castle gates. Your choice. He let his gaze drift lazily across them. Rosier. Nott. You're from the prestigious Sacred 28, right? Imagine how your families would react if I actually went through with it. And you, Zabanai, you kept bragging about your mother during dinner. You really want her finding out how badly you embarrassed yourself on your first night? The three boys shivered and nodded frantically. Terrifying. He was definitely worse than the Dark Lord. Tom tucked away his wand, finally relaxing. Don't say I didn't give you a chance, he said breezily. We're Slytherins. Winners take all. If any of you can beat Mebby any means, you're free to take revenge 1,000 times over. But if you lose, you'll pay the price. Got it? If the Sorting Hat had known how quickly Tom embraced the Slytherin way, it would have bragged about its decision for the rest of the month. Got it. X3. Zabanai and the others shouted in unison, terrified they'd get another round if they hesitated. They buried their hatred deep inside. One day, they thought. One day we'll get our revenge. Chapter 17, The Terrifying Power of Turbo Mode. After teaching a lesson to his clueless roommates, Tom finally let out some of the frustration he'd been bottling up. He ordered the three of them to wash up and sleep fast. Only after the dorm went quiet did he slip into his study space. You're late, Andrus remarked the moment Tom entered. Tom had shut off the space right after dinner, so Andrus had no clue what had happened afterward. When Tom sighed and explained everything, Andrus burst out laughing. Reality is even more magical than the books, hey? Pure bloods? Please. What does bloodline matter when you've got real power? He gave Tom an approving nod. You did well today. When it's time to act, don't hesitate. If you go too easy, no one learns anything. But go too far and the professors get involved. What you did was just right. It's not that simple, Tom replied, shaking his head slightly. This is just the beginning. Trust me, the real trouble's still to come. He sighed, clearly exasperated. I just want to focus on my studies. Why'd I have to end up in Slytherin? Andrus scoffed. Kid, I didn't say this before because I wanted to respect your choices. But after digging through all this Hogwarts info, I can say with confidence Slytherin is the house that suits you best. Hey! Tom blinked. Crossing his arms, Andrus looked serious as he explained, knowledge is important for a wizard, sure. But from the dawn of time till now, including after I died, I can tell you with absolute certainty, no wizard has ever become truly powerful through knowledge alone. He tapped his temple. You know what really matters for a wizard? Tom answered without hesitation, magic power and willpower. Together, they can reshape reality. Now it was Andrus's turn to shake his head. You're forgetting one thing: emotion. Tom frowned. Isn't that part of willpower? Every basic theory book he'd read lumped them together. None had ever drawn a clear line between will and emotion. Andrus just smiled. A wand appeared in his hand, a rare sight, and he raised it high above his head. Expecto Patronum. A massive Patronus took shape above him, radiating overwhelming pressure. When Andrus spoke, his Patronus echoed him, their voices blending into one. Powerful magic, unshakable will, and overflowing emotion. Magic power is the source, your foundation for casting spells. Willpower affects how successfully you can channel that magic, helping guide and convert it. But emotion is what determines a spell's ceiling. Remember this, Tom, magic is driven by the heart. Your heart may be vast, but it needs something to anchor it. That anchor is emotion. The chaos those Slytherins are causing you? Think of it as a trial. It's pushing you to find the perfect balance between will and emotion. Don't waste the opportunity. Andrus's words hit Tom like thunder. He stood there in stunned silence. What Andrus said sounded simple, but it carried a deep, almost spiritual truth. On the surface, it made sense. But the more Tom thought about it, the more he realized it touched the very essence of magic, something not easily understood, let alone mastered. For the first time, Tom entered the turbo mode to fully absorb and process what he'd just learned. 10 silent minutes passed. Slowly, his vacant eyes regained focus. There was something subtly different about him now, something you couldn't quite put into words. A new depth in his gaze. Mimicking Andrus, Tom raised his wand. Expecto Patronum. A silver mist burst from his wand, taking on a human shape. It was vague, just an outline, really, but it was a start. Compared to Andrus's colossal, clearly defined Patronus, Tom's was small and faint. It barely stood taller than he did. Even so, Andrus was clearly impressed. He had taught Tom the charm before, and by the third day, Tom already managed to produce a patron usefully for Andrus to shatter it himself. Why? Because once a Patronus's form is fixed, changing it later becomes nearly impossible. Creating a unique Patronus like his had taken Andrus years of trial and error. The hardest part was always the initial shaping of the form. Tonight, Andrus had only meant to adjust Tom's mindset, not expecting such a new level. Instructor Andrus has reached 50% approval of the host. Reward unlocked. Reward obtained. Congratulations! Host has gained the trait, Absolute Justice. Absolute Justice, non-dark magic attack spells cast by the host receive a power boost. The boost scales with the host's growing magical strength. First personal tutor's approval at 50%. New system feature unlocked, Embodied Learning. Embodied Learning, the tutor can temporarily cast spells through the host's body to increase teaching effectiveness. Time limit, 5 minutes. Note, duration can be increased by 10 seconds per additional point of tutor approval. Cooldown, 24 hours. Host can cancel at any time to regain full control. As soon as the reward kicked in, Tom's Patronus visibly surged, growing to 2 meters tall. Andrus had no idea Tom wasn't just benefiting from his teaching, she was also using his traits. So he only marveled at how far Tom had come, wondering if he had underestimated the boy's talent. Still savoring the surreal feeling of summoning a humanoid Patronus, Tom finally let the magic fade. Even though the turbo state had ended, some lingering inspiration still buzzed in his mind. He didn't want to waste it. Hey, Andrus! I've got a few more questions. These weren't simple questions either. Even elite aurors might have been stumped by them. Most aurors were skilled in technique, but that didn't mean they had the theoretical knowledge to match. But Andrus wasn't like most. Back in his day, the technical side of spellcraft was still in its infancy. If you wanted to master magic, you had to dive deep into theory and figure it out yourself. So despite looking like a brute and having a brawler's temper, Andrus was, at heart, a true academic. An hour later, they finally took a break. Andrus had taught Tom 2 more spells, not anything newly invented, but ancient magic, simple and practical. One was a food testing spell to detect poison. The other was a passive defensive spell that would activate a shield if someone tried to ambush him. Tom memorized both and exited the learning space. His 3 roommates were already snoring, but Tom just couldn't fall asleep. He'd experienced the power of turbo mode firsthand. In the right moment, 10 minutes in that state could be worth 10 days of hard work. Glancing at the 300 plus credits in his system, Tom sighed. When am I finally gonna feel rich? Chapter 18, A Revenge Plan. After using the turbo mode once, Tom was already scheming for a second and third time. But the problem was she couldn't afford it. Since awakening the system over a month ago, Tom had been grinding hard every day, and all he had to show for it were a few hundred credits. It wasn't for lack of effort studied non-stop. He used the study space for at least 3 hours a day, sometimes 6 or 7. The first hour each day was free, but after that, every additional hour cost 6 credits. As for turbo mode, it cost 100 credits for 10 minutes, and each extra minute would cost him 10 more. Thanks to his dedication, he'd already earned some credits by fully learning new spells. That's how he'd saved up the current plus 300. As for achievement points, those were creeping up toward 100, but they were painfully slow to earn. Still, seeing that tidy number of achievement points gave him ideas again. Should he recruit another teacher? To recall, each tier of teacher had a different cost. B rank, your average adult wizard 1 point. A rank, highly skilled 10 points. S rank, once in a generation talent 100 points. SS rank, best in a century 1000 points. SSS rank, legendary beyond time 5000 points. 100 achievement points would get him an S rank to serve as a personal tutor. Andrus, the SS rank, was great and all, but he was out of touch with the modern magical world. Andrus's spells were powerful, no doubt about that, but they were also ridiculously old school. They required in-depth magical theory, fluency in ancient runes, Cretan, Mycenaean, and even dialects from Ionia, the same ancient tongue used to write the Iliad and the Odyssey. Yep, those were magical languages too. So far, the only spells Tom had picked up from Andrus were the Patronus charm, the shockwave spell he used on Zabanai and his gang, and 2 newly acquired spells. Everything else he'd learned came from books, basic spells that were actually accessible. As for the advanced stuff, totally out of reach for now. The restricted section might have what he needed, but let's be real, with his name and house. Yeah, no. He wasn't about to wander into the restricted section and set off all of Dumbledore's alarms. Now that he thought about it, he realized Andrus was the reason he'd been sorted into Slytherin. That one line from the Sorting Hat stuck out, with a purer, older magic than even Salazar himself. It had to be thanks to Andrus's magical trait that he got. His raw magical purity probably outclassed everyone in Slytherin, maybe even Salazar Slytherin himself. Still, Tom decided against summoning another teacher. There might only be one rank between once in a generation and best in a century, but the gap in actual ability? Massive. He figured it was better to keep saving up until he had enough to summon another century's king. 1,000 points was the target. As for anything above that, like a legendary beyond time? Way out of reach for now. He'd think about that once he unlocked more ways to earn achievement points. Damn system started him off at such a high level that his expectations got ruined. KR. Tom wasn't sure when he fell asleep, but he sure knew how he woke up. Loud, annoying laughter echoed through the dorm. Zabanai and his 2 stooges were up earlier than him. Their giggling and chatting had Tom wide awake in minutes. Irritated beyond belief, he got up, smacked each of them with his belt, and kicked them out of the dorm. Finally, peace and quiet. Then he went back to sleep for a bit more. Meanwhile, the 3 expelled roommates stood outside, seething with anger. They were just about to curse Tom out loud when the door to the next dorm opened. A dizzy Draco Malfoy stepped out, blinking at the trio with confusion. "What are you lot doing out here?" Zabanai choked back the insult that was already halfway out of his mouth. The other 2 quickly swallowed theirs as well. It wasn't that they were ashamed, okay, maybe they were, but they definitely didn't want Malfoy to find out they'd been beaten and thrown out by a mudblood. That kind of thing would fuel gossip for weeks. Especially coming from Malfoy. They'd noticed it at the welcome feast yesterday. Malfoy acted even more arrogant than they did, probably because he had 2 massive goons flanking him everywhere he went. "Nothing much," Rosier said smoothly, brain working fast. "First day of school, you know?" We were too excited to sleep, figured we'd take a walk. Malfoy, still half asleep, muttered something about how lame that was and wandered off to wash up. I swear he's even more annoying than Riddle, Zabinai muttered, glaring at Malfoy's back. He was itching to give him a whipping too, just like Tom had done to them. Seriously, Malfoy acted all high and mighty around them. They were all purebloods from the Sacred 28. Where did he get off acting superior? From that two-faced dad of his? Not spat on the ground. They're both jerks. One thing at a time. Let's deal with Riddle first. The other two nodded. Maybe getting beaten up together had bonded them, because within one night, the three had developed some solid villainous camaraderie. They found a quiet corner in the common room and started plotting. We could ambush him, Nott suggested. Wait around a corner or hide in a classroom. Hit him from behind, easy win. No good, Rosier immediately shot it down. The second we use magic directly, we're done for. Didn't you see how skilled he was yesterday? Transfiguration, attack spell, she's smoother than most of us, like he's the real pure blood. And if we mess up? We'll get whipped again. I guarantee it. We could use magical items, Zabinai said darkly. My family has a cursed object. Touch it by accident, and bam, hexed. Are you crazy? Nott flinched. This is Hogwarts. Dumbledore's turf. If he finds out, Riddle'll be fine, but you will definitely be expelled. Zabinai went quiet. Slytherins didn't exactly love Dumbledore. There was a mix of fear, resentment, and quiet rebellion. Most of it came from their parents' attitudes. The last thing they wanted was to draw the headmaster's attention with something reckless and end up hurting themselves in the process. Actually, considering Dumbledore's rumored favoritism toward Muggleborns and half-bloods, the way things would likely play out, they'd be the only ones punished. Maybe we should tell Professor Snape, Rosier muttered as he rubbed his sore arm. My parents were classmates with him, maybe even colleagues. He'll definitely back me up. Zabinai frowned. Tattling to a teacher? That's so embarrassing. What if he tells my mum? Rosier was unfazed. Not a problem. My parents are in Azkaban. What's he gonna do, send a letter there? Ask the Dementors to play mailman. Zabinai and Nott. Chapter 19, Easy Class Schedule. In the end, Nott and Zabinai caved and agreed snitching was the way to go. It was low effort, high impact. All they had to do was discreetly report the incident to their head of house, making sure to emphasize not telling their families or classmates. This way, their pride stayed intact. The three of them worked out a plan and decided to report it right after breakfast. Unfortunately, none of them noticed Daphne sitting nearby. She'd overheard the whole conversation, and a worried look flickered across her face. By the time it was almost 8, Tom had finally gotten his fill of sleep. He got up feeling completely refreshed, cleaned himself up, and made his way to the Slytherin common room. Last night, it was already dark by the time he arrived, so he hadn't had a chance to appreciate Slytherin's one unique feature, a view of the Black Lake from underwater. Standing in front of the tall glass window now, Tom finally got to see it. The morning light barely filtered through the dark water, but it was enough to spot a few fish lazily drifting through the seaweed, completely carefree. Then, out of nowhere, a massive shadow loomed over them. The fish scattered in an instant. And in the next moment, thick, monstrous tentacles glided past the glass. Tom blinked. That had to be the legendary giant squid. Impressive, isn't it? Tom turned. Daphne had somehow appeared beside him, also gazing out the window. I'd heard about Slytherin's underwater view before, but nothing compares to seeing it in person. It's pretty cool, Tom agreed. Kind of feels like staying in one of those ocean view hotels. Though he didn't say the rest aloud, that's pretty much the only nice thing about this place. Aside from the view, the Slytherin dorms were honestly kind of awful. Dark, damp, and completely sunless. The green-themed decor made it feel more haunted than elegant even in the daytime. The vibe was downright creepy. It was hard to stay in a good mood here. Honestly, Tom couldn't even blame Slytherin House entirely for churning out dark wizards left and right. Spend 7 years in a place like this and anyone's personality would twist a bit. Well, except for a bright, optimistic guy like him, of course. What really got on Tom's nerves was how wet everything felt. His blanket this morning felt like it had gained weight from the moisture. If he wrung it out, he was sure actual water would drip from it. God damn it! England was already humid enough. And Hogwarts was up in the Scottish Highlands, where the oceanic climate made everything even worse than London. Add in the dungeon level location and the whole being under a lake thing. This place was basically uninhabitable. Which made him wonder, what the hell was Salazar Slytherin thinking when he picked this spot for his house dorms? Was he trying to drive his students mad? On the way to the Great Hall, Daphne leaned in and quietly filled Tom in on the conversation she'd overheard earlier. Tom didn't seem fazed at all. He just thanked her for the heads up and clearly didn't dwell on it. "You're really not worried, Tom?" Daphne glanced toward the teacher's table and saw that Snape had arrived. She dropped her voice to a whisper and stepped a bit closer. "I heard Professor Snape is super strict. And you did hit them yesterday." "Strict, maybe, but he's not stupid," Tom replied calmly. "Zabinai was the one who provoked me. I just defended myself. If Professor Snape's reasonable, he'll figure out who's in the wrong." "You sure?" Daphne still felt like something was off, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Seeing Tom so confident made her relax just a little. When they sat down at the Slytherin table, along with the usual breakfast spread, the first years also received their class schedules for the term. Tom glanced at his and instantly grinned from ear to ear. "Easy. This is insanely easy." Honestly, he had more classes back in primary school. First year at Hogwarts was mostly about building a foundation. There weren't any electives, just a few core classes. And most of them were short, only the double periods ran long. Tom checked his schedule, only one class in the morning, Transfiguration with Gryffindor at 9 and Herbology with Ravenclaw at 1 in the afternoon. That was it. A grand total of 100 minutes of class today. The rest of the week looked just as relaxed. 2 to 3 short classes a day, max. Perfect. That gave him plenty of time for his own plans. "Let's explore the castle a bit after breakfast," he told Daphne. "I heard the corridors here move around. Real easy to get lost." Daphne nodded quickly. They both polished off breakfast in a few minutes, and Tom even grabbed 2 slices of bread and some butter for later just in case he got hungry. Over at the Gryffindor table, Hermione watched them leave and looked like she wanted to follow, but Lavender Brown was chattering non-stop and Hermione couldn't break away. As soon as Tom was gone, Zabinai and the other 2 exchanged glances and gave a quick nod. A few minutes later, Professor Snape left the hall and the 3 of them jumped to their feet and chased after him, intercepting him just outside the entrance. "Rosier," Snape said, narrowing his eyes. He didn't bother greeting the other, she only remembered Rosier's name. After all, both of Rosier's parents had been Death Eaters, basically Snape's old colleagues. "Professor, you've got to help us!" Zabinai cried. And before Snape could say a word, Zabinai pulled open his robes and exposed his chest, which was covered in thin red marks. "Ah!" A girl who had just arrived to eat screamed in horror. "Wait, what? A teacher and a young boy? My eyes! I can imagine it. Mom, I'm not pure anymore." It was peak breakfast time, and the entrance hall was packed. Everyone who saw the scene instantly perked up. "You idiot, follow me!" Snape growled through gritted teeth, looking like he wanted to evaporate on the spot. Without another word, he bolted toward the dungeons, and the 3 boys scrambled after him. If they stayed another minute, who knew what rumors would start flying around the castle tomorrow? Once inside his office, Snape spun around and fixed Zabinai with an icy glare. "You better explain what the hell you're doing," he said coldly. "Or I'll give you detention for a month heaven if you are one of my own." "Professor, look at these marks. Tom Riddle did this to me." Zabinai pointed to his chest, practically shaking with emotion. Just thinking about it made him want to cry. Not even his mother or her 6 different husbands had ever hit him like this. Not and Rosier quickly chimed in too, tripping over each other as they described what happened last night and this morning. With every word, Snape's expression darkened. Chapter 20, Transfiguration Class. Bang! "This is outrageous." Snape slammed his hand down on the desk with a thunderous noise. "Fighting another student on the first day, what does he think he's doing?" "Professor, that Riddle kid is totally out of control." Rosier jumped in quickly, fanning the flames. "He thinks the wizarding world works like a muggle school or something. Doesn't care about rules at all. He clearly doesn't respect you." Snape's cold eyes swept over him, and Rosier immediately shut up, like someone had pressed a mute button. "Whether or not he respects me," Snape said icily, "is for me to decide. Not you. I've heard enough. I'll handle it. You're dismissed. Yes, Professor. X3. The three of them left, practically skipping with glee, already picturing Snape punishing Tom Riddle or maybe even expelling him. But once they were gone, Snape's expression didn't soften. He'd dealt with arrogant students before. But this early? This blatant? That was a first. Even back when Voldemort was just Tom Riddle, he hadn't been this bold. He didn't beat up 3 roommates and whip them on his very first night. He had brushed off Dumbledore's warning yesterday. Clearly, that had been a mistake. This wasn't just some problem child. This one needed a serious lesson. Snape's eyes narrowed in thought. Better if he handled it himself. He didn't want that old fool Dumbledore swooping in to play the nice guy again. Today, he'd make sure Tom Riddle knew exactly who ruled Slytherin. Hogwarts had over 140 staircases, and most of them had minds of their own. One might lead from the 2nd floor to the 3rd now, and end up on the top floor a few minutes later. The good news? They weren't totally random. Some changed on a timer, others shifted depending on how hard you stepped, or if you stomped 3 times. Sometimes, if you were lucky, one could take you straight from the 1st floor to wherever you wanted to go. Convenient, if you knew how to use them. The bad news? Tom and Daphne had no clue how any of that worked. They were new. And clueless. Determined not to be late for their first class, they set out early. Unfortunately, Tom kicked a step without thinking, and a staircase from the 3rd to 4th floor rocketed them up to the top of the castle. They had to walk all the way back down slowly, carefully, terrified they'd trigger another detour. By the time they finally reached the classroom, they were nearly late. One day, Tom swore to himself, once he figured out how this castle worked, he was going to rewrite the rules. Make it way more annoying for everyone. He wasn't about to suffer alone. With that comforting thought, he and Daphne stepped into the classroom. A tabby cat sat on the teacher's desk. Its fur was patterned with dark rings around the eyes, making it stand out. The cat was quietly watching the students chat amongst themselves. Tom gave it a brief glance, recognizing what it was immediately, but didn't bother greeting or revealing her identity. He just walked deeper into the room. Riddle. Over here. Hermione waved enthusiastically, pointing to the empty seat beside her. Tom walked over without hesitation. Daphne pouted and followed reluctantly. As soon as they sat down, Hermione turned to him eagerly. So, what do you think of Slytherin so far? It's all right. Everyone's been pretty welcoming. Really? But I thought Slytherins didn't like Muggleborns or half-bloods. They don't? I haven't noticed. My roommates seem friendly enough. Oh. Okay. Hermione let it go, then gave a proud pat on her textbook. I already finished reading this 3 times last night. How about you? Daphne couldn't help but scoff. If magic were something you could just read your way into, there wouldn't still be so many muggles in the world, would there? Hermione caught the attitude and raised an eyebrow. If I've got magical talent, then reading will absolutely help me learn. Or do purebloods think they can just sleep their way into knowing spells? At least we're not desperate like you. We've grown up with magic, it's second nature to us. Unlike some bumpkins, Daphne muttered under her breath, just quiet enough that Tom wouldn't hear. To Tom's surprise, Daphne actually held her own in the argument, sharp and snappy, nothing like the sheltered heiress she looked like. Both girls were throwing barbs with zero defense, all offense. Tom sat silently between them, expression flat. It felt like both of his ears were taking direct hits. It's 8:55, he suddenly announced. Hermione blinked. Realizing class was about to start, and that the professor could arrive any second, she gave a little huff and turned away from Daphne. Daphne also looked away. A few minutes later, the bell rang. Still no Professor McGonagall. But 2 sweaty, panting boys came running into the room. Yes. Made it. Harry gasped, bent over, grinning as he and Ron rushed to find empty seats. Those stairs are cursed, Ron huffed, wiping his face. He looked around and, not seeing McGonagall anywhere, relaxed even more. Ha! We're not late. She is. Shouldn't have bothered sprinting all the way here, I am about to pass out. Will McGonagall always be late? He said it loud enough that even those sitting near the front could hear it clearly. Tom turned to look at him with sympathy. Sure, He'd beaten up his roommates on night 1, but Ron had just done something far braver, insulting Professor McGonagall on his very first day. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen." The cat suddenly leapt off the desk and transformed mid-air into Professor McGonagall, who landed gracefully, standing tall and stern. Everyone jumped in surprise. Ron's jaw dropped open, his face turning ghost white. Professor McGonagall gave him a pointed glance before addressing the class. "I'm pleased to see no one was late for our first lesson. I hope you'll keep this up. I, for one, will never be late." Ron let out a faint, mosquito-level whimper. "We're doomed. She heard us." Harry, on the other hand, silently shuffled his seat a bit farther away from his new best mate. "Us? I didn't say anything."
Additionally, if you would like to request novels and access my Google Drive where I have 200 plus audiobooks, then you can join my Patreon. Link is also provided in the description.
Thanks for listening.